No, I don't. Can you get me just a paper towel, please? It's all dressed up. Oh, goodness. I said, Martha's all dressed up. Thank you. Yeah. How's the weather in St. Louis, Martha?
It's cold and rainy.
Oh.
Well, cool and rainy.
So Matt, when you start off, we just need a last name on Martha, unless you know who Jim is for the minutes. We have last names on all of them except for Jim.
I couldn't guess who Jim is.
Maybe she is.
Bob and Diane, did you record everyone who's in, Martha? Or do I need to do that?
You need to do that. It's the Bibbies.
Yeah.
B-I-B-B-Y. And Kira, you know Kira.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you all don't know this, but I'm taking the minutes today.
Very impressive. You're just knocking them out of the park today, Curtis.
Not only is he dressed up, but he's
Yeah.
taking the minutes.
Curtis, I also believe Susan Beltwell is Mark Beltwell. I could be wrong, but I think that I was expecting Mark to pop in. Could be both, but I know Mark is supposed to attend.
Hey Matt, could you bring Jim in and let him tell us his last name?
Matt's muted.
It's not me. It would be Thomas who would be bringing people in.
Thank you for that.
So I'm not. Hold on. Can you? See if that works.
Thomas, you need to unmute the attendee, Jim. We need a last name from Jim.
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yep.
Hi, this is Jim Riley from 6 Maple Heights.
Hi, Jim. How are you?
Howdy.
Thank you.
Get the last names of Riley.
Yeah.
No. That's why I'm talking so.
Food is all different too, doesn't have the settings.
All right. So Dave, I think we're at past 9, and I think we should get started because we have a full agenda.
I'll just listen.
Does that work? Great. So good morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm going to call this meeting to order. I want to walk through a few different items to lay the groundwork for the next few hours of us together, since this is different from anything we have done before in a year where we've tried lots and lots of new things. My name is Matt Dunn. I am the town moderator for the town of Hartland, and I'm going to be facilitating these two informational meetings. So I want to start off by just making it clear that this is not a town meeting, but in fact, two back-to-back informational sessions. The first informational session will be focused on the town, the second for the school. We are scheduled to do the town first and hopefully within 2 hours, and then would have the school informational session starting at 11 a.m. There is some possibility, depending on how this goes, that the town session will run over. If it does, we will start the school portion as soon as we're done with the town portion. But hopefully we will keep this moving quickly and smoothly, understanding this is the first time we've done it this way. So to clarify why it is that we're not doing our traditional getting together at Damon Hall is because of the same thing that has changed so much in our lives, which is the pandemic. And the select board decided out of an abundance of caution that rather than having people come together at any time throughout this spring to move voting onto Australian ballot. And as a result, we are having an informational session to be able to provide people with information to help inform them on that voting process. Therefore, this will not be a traditional forum for debating and voting on various articles or budget items, but rather an opportunity to learn more about the various articles before voting. And so we will be presenting information. I will actually be reading all of the articles to make sure that we're doing this in a thorough way, and then allowing for people to ask questions about those individual articles. We are upholding some traditions of town meeting, like ties, but also having a representative, in fact, our own state representative, John Bartholomew, providing a brief update as to what's happening in Montpelier. And again, I will be reading through the articles like we usually do in town meeting so that everyone can hear them out loud. The select board in their deliberation assured us that this is intended to be a one-time thing, and that hopefully if the pandemic has moved on and is behind us by next spring, we will be back to the traditional town meeting for town issues. And if you're asking why we are holding this informational meeting on a beautiful Sunday morning in April, it was an attempt to respond to some folks in town who had asked to explore doing a session like this on a weekend, so that work responsibilities would not be a deterrent to attending. Since we were choosing a different time and date, the logic was that we might as well try that new time and date. There was no accounting for weather. If it was pouring rain, it might be different, but we are going to work with it and hopefully get good attendance today. This is actually officially a select board meeting. So you will notice that there's going to be an agenda before we get to the actual articles that we're going to be discussing, just so that there isn't confusion why we're going back and forth. Dave and I will be, sharing on the screen what it is, where we are in either the agenda or going through the articles so that everyone can follow along. And as an informational meeting that doesn't have formal motions, amendments, or opportunities for voting, the parliamentary procedures that usually manage town meeting process are just not as relevant. So calling the question or such processes are not germane to this particular process. And so what we will be doing is just asking everyone for patience as we get questions answered. In order to bring some order to it, I will be calling on individuals and working with our friends at CATV who have very, very generously been willing to help facilitate this Zoom meeting and record it to be able to call on people in the order that they raise their hand. And we will prioritize individuals who have who have not asked a question before in each of the articles. So if you have multiple questions, we'll go through the folks who have not had a chance to ask a question before going back around. And obviously we will provide the subject matter expert, whether it's the town manager or it's the individual representing the organization that is requesting an individual appropriation to respond to questions rather than just opening it up across the board. There is, for those of you who are not as familiar with Zoom, there is at the bottom of your screen a raised hand icon that folks can click on in order to say that they are interested in asking a question. And Thomas and I will do our best to figure out, who has raised their hand first and move our way through that in a clear and fair process. What I will also say is that for anyone who is on by telephone, you can't do hand raising. So I'll try to keep an eye on the attendee list. If anyone's on the phone, we will provide an opportunity for someone on the phone to be able to ask a question as well. At this point, I don't see anyone who is connecting in that fashion, but we'll just keep an eye on it as it goes. I will also be inviting individuals for larger budget items to make formal presentations and in both the town and the school meeting. I will also ask, barring any objection, to allow that non-residents be allowed to present on a budget item and answer questions if they are the appointed person for that organization, but not to ask questions in the forum, since this is intended for Hartland citizens to gain information rather than just a general regional forum. We're attempting to do the town information session in 2 hours. If we start to go long, I will judiciously attempt to limit the length of presentations for individual appropriations to try to keep us moving along. Obviously, if there is something that is really important to get out there, the point is to get information out, so we will try to accommodate, but just understand we're trying to move this within this framework, and with the hope that there is a 5-minute break between the town portion and the school portion. Zoom breaks are very important. I would also remind everyone that there is an actual town meeting report. Everyone did get the flyer that gave the highlights and the agenda that we're going to be walking through, but there is much more detail in the report. It's available at the post office, Damon Hall, at the general stores, and it is available as a PDF on the town website that you can download. So as you are hearing from folks in this informational session, or if people can't make it, they are welcome to go and avail themselves of that for additional information across the board. Finally, I just think it's important to recognize that the last time we got together as a community in this kind of way was just before the pandemic hit. And we have had one heck of a year together, and both the leadership in the town and at the school has just done an extraordinary job of bringing on new technology, adjusting pieces along the way, and doing incredible work to keep the town and school moving forward in the ways that we would hope that they would. And it's just, it's been extraordinary as a citizen just to watch that work happen and people being flexible and adjusting to do it. Before we get started, Curtis, do you have a comment you want to add?
Yeah, I need to get a last name from Bill, and then just to verify that I believe Chuck is probably Chuck Fenton.
So Bill, you're welcome to speak or unmute yourself and speak just for the purposes of last name.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
It's just Bill Barrows. It's the highway guy. Just looking in on it for a minute.
Thank you, Bill.
All right.
We're just recording folks who are attending for the minutes. And Chuck, is that Chuck Fenton? Chuck, you're now permitted to unmute just for the purposes of getting a last name. All right, well, we will work on that. I don't want to hold this up. Curtis, let's loop back around and just make sure that the Chuck is the Chuck that we think it is. Great. So the first item on the agenda, and again, we're following the actual meeting agenda before we get to the articles, is are there additions or deletions to the agenda? Hearing none, we will move on to the legislative update. John Bartholomew, our one of our two state representatives, and the state representative that actually is a resident of Hartland, is going to provide an update on behalf of the delegation. And as I told John, we're going to hold it to 5 minutes and appreciate you spending some time sharing what's happening in also a very interesting year in Montpelier.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. And yeah, it's very interesting. And as you probably all know, we have 3 senators, Dick McCormick, Alice Nitka, and Allison Clarkson. And as Matt said, we have 2 representatives, myself and Elizabeth Burrows. And on behalf of all of us, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to represent you in the legislature. Elizabeth Burrows is brand new to the legislature. She's from West Windsor and is doing a great job. She's serving on the Healthcare Committee. And I, after serving for years on the Agriculture and Forestry Committee, am now on the House Transportation Committee and also on the House Rules Committee. The legislative session is going to be coming to a close near the end of May. It's been extremely challenging to effectively do our work meeting virtually. We've been virtual for over a year now. One day last week, I was actually on Zoom for over 13.5 hours. But we're doing our best to meet the needs of Vermont and Vermonters and make this work. We're making a lot of decisions about how the state will spend over $1 billion in American Rescue Plan Act dollars, which are coming to Vermont from the federal government. In our fiscal year 22 budget, it's now in the Senate. It includes new funding to support working families and small businesses, and to provide much needed funding, increased funding for our Clean Water Fund, sewer infrastructure, information technology upgrades to improve state government, higher education, workforce training development, and creation of affordable housing. The U.S. Department of Treasury is still in the process of determining how to allocate funds directly to municipalities across the country, and those will be distributed to local communities based on population. And we still are waiting to see regulations as well on the eligible uses for this money, but it looks like Hartland may be eligible for almost $350,000 coming directly to the town. So the legislature is doing our best to create an economic pandemic recovery plan that leaves no Vermonter behind and rebuilds the economy in all 14 counties. We recognize the need for high-speed internet for all Vermonters. It's never been more clear with the pandemic. The digital divide has only gotten worse. So we're investing ARPA funds to help meet the state's goal of achieving universal access to reliable, high-quality, and affordable broadband. After centuries of institutionalized racism, legislatures this year are really having very meaningful discussions about equality. And equality is a topic of discussion in many of our committees. There's a social equity caucus that meets every week. It's tripartisan and frequently draws over 100 participants. Both the judiciary and government operations committees are working on bills addressing criminal justice reform. Another example comes in the Healthcare Committee. Statistics and studies show that people experience many barriers to healthcare based on their race or ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, or disability. So we have a bill there that's taking a step towards equal access to healthcare for all. The Senate has passed 2 constitutional amendments, one clarifying the prohibition on slavery and indentured servitude, and another declaring the right to personal reproductive liberty. And those will be taken up by the House and will eventually go to all of the voters before they're adopted into the Constitution. The House recently passed a joint resolution apologizing and expressing sorrow and regret for our state-sanctioned eugenic policies and practices back in the early 20th century. Regarding climate change, most of the significant legislation this year is coming from the transportation committees with our Transportation Modernization Act, and that's because transportation accounts for 44% of Vermont's carbon emissions. So in addition to making unprecedented investments with this extra money in our roads, railways, and bridges, the bill is also using one-time stimulus money to address climate change by providing more affordable, low-carbon transportation options for people across the state. And that includes incentives for new and used electric vehicles and e-bicycles, improving access to electric vehicle charging stations, fare-free public transit across the state through 2022, and funding to begin electrifying our bus fleets. We also had a bill to modernize the state's bottle bill, and the goal here is to increase recycling and create green jobs and reduce plastic pollution. And we are also spending a lot of time trying to figure out how to deal with our crisis of underfunded pension funds for our teachers, our state troopers, and state employees. So that's just a few things. I need to stop. I want to mention that we are planning a Zoom meeting with constituents. So if any of these topics are enticing, you want more information and want to share concerns, we're going to set that up for Sunday, May 2nd. And I think it's at 1 o'clock, and we will, send me email if you want the link, and we'll put the link up on the town list. And did I make 5 minutes? I don't know.
Almost, John, but thank you. I appreciate the effort, and thank you for your service again in a very strange time. And please send our best to the rest of the delegation and thank them for their service as well.
Thank you all.
Excellent. So with that, we are going to go on to the review and discussion of town meeting articles, and we're going to do those in order. Some of you may recall this can sometimes be a little bit tedious, but we're going to get through it as we can. And because the warning had articles in a particular order, unlike in past years where we've sometimes put them in a different order, we're just going to walk through them as they were written. And the first article is a article to remind folks that we need to elect all town officers required by law. There will, on the ballot, there is a moderator for a one-year term for the town.
Matt?
Yes?
Matt, if I'm just going to ask Thomas if he can share my screen, and I can put that warning up on the screen while you're reading that as well, okay?
Sounds good. I also just realized Chuck, who we think is Chuck Fenton, has raised his hand. And if he can come off of mute and just confirm for our minutes that it's in fact Chuck Fenton, that would be great. Or some other Chuck. Is that a doable thing? Chuck, are you there? Chuck, I think you can come off mute just to confirm. All right, well, we will try it again. And Dave, I think you have the, oh no, there's Chuck. Chuck, you on? No? All right, well, all right. Dave, I think you now have permission to share.
Thomas, can you, thank you.
So again, Dave will be sharing this just so we can be looking at the articles while we are discussing them, in case people are coming in late or trying to follow along. Again, Article 1 is simply a reminder that to elect all town officers as required by law, which as we know is being done by Australian ballot as it is traditionally. Moderator for the town of a one-year term, town clerk for the town, a 3-year term, town treasurer, a 3-year term, select person for a 2-year term, a second select person for a 3-year term, lister for 2 years of a 3-year term, completing an existing term, a lister for a 3-year term, a first constable for a 2-year term, and a library trustee for a 3-year term. So this is an article just to remind us that that is on the ballots that have been mailed to everyone, and is the first article for the town. Any questions about that? Seeing none, we will go on to Article 2, which is shall the voters authorize total general fund and highway fund expenditures of $3,086,700, of which $2,430,485 shall be raised by taxes. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dave Ormston, our town manager, to provide a presentation and update on the budget.
Thank you, Matt. Give me just a moment here. I gotta get past my icon. I'm going to go ahead and do it this way. I can't get past my Zoom icon to get to the actual slideshow part of this. So I'm going to go via this way here, which is essentially the same thing. So the Hartland Select Board is presenting a 2021-2022 total budget of $3,086,700. That number is without appropriations. And this is a combined increase of 5.1% over the prior year. The highest priority for this year's budget is a continued investment in our roads. You can see here the difference between last year's $90,000 increase over the year before. We continue to eye the key ingredients that go into maintaining our roads. And this year's funding includes, as you look at the breakdown here, I've highlighted kind of the big movers here in the budget. The bigger mover this year is in the paving and resurfacing. It's an increase of $30,000. That brings our spending to $170,000 as we work towards the necessary goal of $200,000 in fiscal year 2023. It is up from $120,000 in fiscal year 2020. And in fiscal year 2019, that was $80,000. You'll see the actual cost here in fiscal year 2020 at $57,500. That's a little deceiving because the prior year, actually in 2019, we spent $180,000, which was about $100,000 over budget. So to kind of make up for that deficit spending the year before, we cut our spending in fiscal year 2020 to kind of bring us to level funding on that. And again, looking to 170 and to get to $200,000 in future years. Winter maintenance, you see an increase here as well. What drives that increase is two things. Really, we've increased the overtime budget for the employees by $5,000. We do have an additional employee this year. We hired him on this year, so we've budgeted for that overtime. Also, the last few years, we have hit the ceiling on what we've been budgeting for overtime due to the weather that we've been having. However, this year was a little moderate. We didn't quite have as much issues, but nevertheless, we budgeted for it in future years. It's not highlighted, but summer maintenance, even though it's only about a 3% increase, we had a reduction of an expense there, but we also increased subcontracting, which is essentially our ditching, by $10,000. And that was an important investment that I'll discuss in a few minutes. And Under the town highway administration section, the increase there is predominantly due to a $9,000 increase in workers' compensation. We had some work-related injuries a year or two ago, and it has caught up to us from an insurance point of view for next year. So why have we increased our investments this past couple of years? And again, this year, again, it's a $90,000 increase. For the highway department, you'll see that that's a 7.1% increase. It's pretty similar to what it was last year and the year before. And primarily, and I'm going to run through a couple pictures here, you're going to get an idea as to why we're looking to invest in these key components. So asphalt, which we've increased by $30,000. These pictures that I'm going to run through are our most important roads. This is County Road. I'm also going to show Brownsville Road, Clay Hill Road, Queechee Road, and a couple of secondary roads. I also want to note that I could have put multiple pictures of each road. I've chosen for time constraints to show one picture, but don't be fooled and say, well, this is just one segment. For the most part, the entire road looks similar to what these pictures look like. This is the Brownsville Road, essentially from County Road looking towards Best Road. This is Clay Hill Road coming off of Queechee Road, heading towards Route 5. This is one of the first curves that you see. And again, as you go along, the end of Clay Hill Road and everything in between looks not too dissimilar, although this is one of the harder hit portions. This is Queechee Road, where we have an exorbitant amount of traffic. Again, I've gotten a few phone calls this spring about Queechee Road. Again, as we go kind of talk about this, we have 10 miles of paved roads. We've done maybe 2 miles, 1.75 miles, maybe in the last 2 to 3 years. So we've got that much more to go. We're hoping to get to $200,000 simply so that we can do 1 mile a year. In 10 years, we can get into a cycle and we're repaving segments every 10 years. $200,000 will get you 1 mile or perhaps upwards to 2 miles, depending on what you need to do to the particular road to prep it for paving. This here is Gilson Road. You can also see some ditching issues here, creating some of the cracks. This is Mount Hunger Road. Again, Mount Hunger Road and Gilson are somewhat of a secondary road for us, although still see a tremendous amount of traffic. And this is Bowers Road here. So this is why we are looking to, we've proposed to increase the spending over last year, and we've been doing this for 2 years and hope to do so again into next year to get ourselves into a good rotation as far as paving goes. Ditching, this is a $10,000 increase. It's under subcontracting. You'll see why we get focused on ditching, but for the most part, to start right off, it's mandated by the state of Vermont in certain sections of the road. Here, this is on Advent, actually Mace Hill Road. You'll see that this is a waterway here. The ditching is to essentially what the state likes about what we've done here, and again, this has been dictated to us by the state of Vermont, is water sheds off of the road. It's filtered through the grass and the stone, so the road material and the dirt essentially gets filtered out, and the water finds its way to the waterway. You don't see it running down the road. Again, it's kind of filtered off to the side. And this is what the states are mandating, what's called a hydro-connected segment. We have 35 miles of hydro-connected segments in the town of Hartland. 15 miles of these need to be addressed per state statute by 2035. So that's 1 mile a year. We haven't been doing that, but we need to get there. Again, we've gone from $25,000 to $35,000. And we think that with that, we should be able to get where we need to go in a 15-year period. Now, there's other reasons why we do ditching, and we're going to need to put money into non-hydro connected areas as well. especially this year, based upon what you see here in this road. And why do we do ditching? I think the water pretty much tells us why. You can see the water finding its way down the side of the road here, creating erosion and headaches for our highway crew. You'll see the same situation here. Again, the water essentially creating its own ditch, so to speak. However, we can't control it. Again, it's finding its way to the road, creating travel difficulties and road maintenance difficulties. Here's a segment on Best Road. Again, it's just a natural kind of corridor. You can see that, you know, if this was a rain event, you can see where the water is going to go. Again, here you can see where there's the remnants of a ditch. Over time, this is filled in. We need to reestablish these ditches. But if you don't ditch, you can see what it can do on the pavement as well. It doesn't affect just dirt roads. You see it's going to be erosion here, and it's going to just continue to deteriorate the road. It's already showing deterioration here, but you know, some ditching here would get, and a shoulder would get us farther along. This is a segment that has been ditched. This was a hydro-connected area dictated by the state of Vermont. However, you'll see here, you got some nice ditching. You got the water can find its way off the side of the road. It's going to come down. It's going to get filtered by the rock and the grass and find its way down to the water area. This is Webster Road. Both of these pictures, we had tremendous problems with these roads prior to the ditching. This road was done 2 years ago, and it has been much better for it. And continued or less day-to-day maintenance for us than what we had when there was no ditching here, where we were seeing tremendous amount of erosion. Stone, we've invested in stone and we continue to do so. The stone, the bigger the stone is meant for essentially the base of the road. As we work up from the base, the stone gets smaller. Smaller road stone finds is used for the area closer to the surface. Here on this particular road, I believe this is Densmore Hill Road. You can see where it is providing a base to the road. It's also providing or keeping the mud at bay. We've used it here to keep the road passable. We've increased the stone spending by $4,000. However, along with the stone comes the cover or the dressing for the road, which is the 3/4 inch hard pack material. When we apply this and it gets driven on, it gets packed down and creates a very nice driving surface. Now, I spend my time on stone, not necessarily to get into the $4,000 increase that we've put into the stone, but to tell you why we're investing in our sand. During the wintertime, we put a tremendous amount of sand down on our roads. It goes down over essentially what I just discussed, the stone and the hard pack. It goes down all winter long. Historically, we've had a very fine, thin dirt, so to speak, and come springtime, it becomes a real, basically a slime or a film. Basically takes away all the work that we did the summer before. So we've invested and continue to invest, and this is what the spending is on the sand, is to, yep, you guessed it, is to put stone into the sand. Therefore, what gets left behind is a stone material and not that real fine dirt. The stone also provides greater traction for the drivers. So the investment is twofold and keeps our roads where we want them to be. Lastly, equipment. You can see here, this is just 4 of our units. We also have 2 more additional dump trucks. We have a backhoe, 2 more pickup trucks. We have a fleet. It is not cheap to maintain. We send about 60% of our equipment expenditures to an equipment fund to fund future purchases to keep our equipment healthy. The $12,000 increase in the equipment is for the, or intended for the equipment fund to ensure that we have future purchases. In the last couple of years alone, we've purchased 2 10-wheel dump trucks, backhoe, a front-end loader, a 1-ton truck. That's just in the time that I've been here, which is my 4th budget now. We have 2 6-wheel dump trucks to go, a couple other pieces of machinery. So that $12,000 increase is to ensure that we've got the proper funds to move forward. Again, real quick synopsis on the highway fund, where the spending is going. On the general fund, you're going to see on your right-hand corner, you'll see some expenditures or percentage increases. Again, the yellow is the most biggest movers, so to speak. You'll see some on the right-hand corner that's a 5.5% increase or an 8% increase. It amounts to maybe a couple $100 or maybe $1,000. Again, the 2 bigger movers is in the administrative section and the ordinance administration and planning. Total administration is essentially healthcare costs. We had 2 employees. We had some changeover. The healthcare benefits went from essentially a single person or somebody who wasn't getting benefits to 2 full family plans. Plus a yearly percent increase in healthcare costs. That was about a $38,000 increase due to that. And the other budgeted item that we have here, and it is a priority for the general fund, is an ordinance administration and planning position. This is a new position for us. We've been discussing this now for internally 2.5 years. That's a $47,000 budgeted yearly salary for that position. Altogether with benefits and employer payroll taxes, it's about a $75,000 expense for the town. However, we do have some decreases. We have total capital improvements reduced by $25,000. I assure you, we're not taking our eye off the ball on capital improvements. There is plenty of work for us to do. The reduction is twofold. One, simply we as administrative staff need to focus on things such as the 3 corners intersection, the implementation of the ordinance administrator, and some other items, leaving us the ability to focus on this being a little bit less, but nevertheless, we plan on doing the floors at the activity center and the remaining stairs at Damon Hall. And under miscellaneous, we had $25,000 budgeted last year for a cleanup of a property we inherited through tax sale. We don't need to spend that this year or next. We have since sold that property, so we have a reduction there, giving us an increase of about $60,000 or 3.6%. Because the ordinance administrator position is such an important position to us and an increase to the general fund, I just want to give a little history of this and what you should expect the duties to be. We've long since internally felt as though development in town is happening and we're essentially missing it due to our internal inefficiencies. If we miss it or if it's not making the grand list, that means that that money is not translating into revenue to the town, which means that everybody else besides this particular property owner is paying more than their fair share. So when we did a reappraisal 2 years ago, we kind of tracked the development that we did catch through the reappraisal. Which means that that particular year, first time in about 15 years, we were actually out at each individual property. We don't do that every year, hopefully every 5 years, but during a 2-year stretch in time, and again, I've got 2 slides here. The report by Doug Linnell was actually 10 pages long. There was 52 properties that we came upon that was new to us that made the grand list. That was $7.6 million in assessed value. $7.6 million in assessed value translates into roughly $175,000, which is lost to the town. We're not capturing. That is both town and school revenue dollars, but obviously every little bit helps. And again, some of this we would have found, some of these people would have come to us, but there's certainly a decent percentage that we would have missed and picked up maybe at some point in time. So we feel as though we need a better, more efficient system to track this development. Also, during this reappraisal, we came across units that people were living in or were being rented out by property owners. They were certainly substandard. They don't have 911 numbers, so our ability to respond to these people are limited. And certainly the fire wardens are not alert to these people, and they are obviously not up to code. Knowing rental units is an important step for us. And something that we're not completely capable of doing at the moment efficiently. Lastly, on this subject, before I get into the actual, some of the descriptions real quick, this is an email from John Sanders about 1.5 years, 2 years ago. I get these from time to time. This particular one pertained to a brush fire. About 50 feet by 100 feet brush fire on top of a hill. Not only did Hartland respond, but Hartford and Windsor needed to respond, all because this was an illegal trash burn. So we have an ordinance against illegal trash burning. This was an illegal trash burn. Not only that, and this kind of sums up some of our problems, not only that, but when it came time to try and find the person, the house number 911 number was different than what we had on the 911 map. So the 911 numbering was not correct. And there was a rental property here. There was tenants in the building as well. I don't believe the fire inspectors were aware of it. You can see Bruce Martin from Fire Safety telling us, requesting we inform him when we learn of multi-unit occupancies. This is John desperately telling me, hey, guys, you got to enforce these illegal burning ordinances or other ordinances, and we really don't have the ability to do so. So this position is intended to enact a new ordinance so that we can track who is coming into town. It's not zoning. We're not particularly interested in where they place the house, where the color of their shutters are, or if they have a doghouse included. We simply want to know that you're here. Let us know. Obviously, you're going to be handed on to the listers so that we can tax you, but we have no idea who's coming into town. And we'd also try and like to map our growth for future decision-making. So that's a part of it. And the second real important part of this is to focus on our 911 numbering, which is showing some issues, not only with what I explained there, but a couple other things. And then some other things, floodplain bylaws we have, ordinance enforcement, driveway permits, overlay permits. These things here all fall on the town manager, whose time is thin. And the extra person obviously helps spread that out and make it possible. Again, quick overview of the general fund and the spending. It's a 5.1% increase. What does this mean for your taxes? If it's you're assessed at about $250,000, which at least used to be the average amount or assessed value in Hartland, it's a $96.25 increase. If it's a $300,000 valuation, you're about $115. $200,000 valuation, you're about $77. Matt, that's all I got at the moment.
Great. Dave, thank you. Sorry that we weren't able to present that at full screen. Some of those images were a little bit small, but the fun of technology. Dave, are you planning on making that deck available? Is that something that's easy to do in case people want to take a look at it more close up?
I can
If
put
not-
that PowerPoint online. Would probably be sufficient. I can do that Monday morning.
Great. 'Cause I think
I'm kind of in limbo here, Matt, as to whether to go back to stop screen sharing or to go back to the presentation if somebody has questions. So
why don't you, let's see if people have questions, and then we can go back to the presentation and maybe try to see if we can do a present. If you hit escape, you should be able to get the icon out of the front of your screen, although it's not always, doesn't work on all computers the same way. So at this point, folks who are attendees, if you have questions, now is the time to raise your hand, and we will, Dave and other members of the select board, as necessary, will try to answer them. Are there any questions? I'm going to give it a couple more minutes or a couple more seconds. There's a question. Okay. So Dean and Susan Greenberg have a question. And Thomas, if you can allow them to unmute. It looks like you can unmute now and ask your question.
Sorry, I don't have a question. I pressed the wrong button.
Just a quick question, however. Can individuals report apparent changes in buildings to anybody?
So Dean, when you say apparent changes, do you mean like an addition or as far as somebody doing something to the house, or are you thinking like a junkyard out in front of their house?
I'm talking about building houses or building rooms or building garages or whatever.
So Dean, presently the best direction for that information would be to the lister's office.
Okay, that's what I want to know.
Perfect.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. Thank you, Susan and Dean. Any other questions? Inadvertent or otherwise? Is there anyone who is on the phone? I don't think there's anyone on the phone who wouldn't be able to raise their hand. Okay. Well, I'm going to assume that there are none. And Dave, your comprehensive presentation was well received, including the focus on the two big initiatives coming up. So we're going to move forward because of the new platform and the like. If people are struggling with the technology, and as we're getting into other parts of the warning, you do have questions, do raise your hand. Dave's not going anywhere. We can loop back around. I'm going to try to keep it in order, but don't want technology to get in the way of people being able to ask questions at an informational session. Great. All right, so we will move on to Article 3. And Dave, are you going to go back to sharing the?
Yep, Thomas, you need to I need to share the screen again.
Or give you host. There you go. And again, for everyone, we are going to be going through the articles one by one. This is different than in past town meetings where the individual appropriations that had been voted on in the past were usually taken as a single comprehensive article. For a variety of reasons, we've now broken them out into individual articles, largely because you need to vote on them individually, right? It's not the same as in a town meeting where you could have taken out one of them and discussed it and the like. So we're going to go through these one by one. I'm going to read them first, and then we will see if people have questions. So Article 3 is, shall the town vote to appropriate $3,000 to support CATV, Community Access Television? CATV airs the select board and school board meetings and other community events on cable TV. So that is Article 3. Are there any questions about Article 3? Okay, moving on to Article 4. Shall the town vote to appropriate $1,500 to support Cover Home Repair, Inc.? Cover Home Repair provides home repair and weatherization for those in need. And I believe Bill Newcomb is here to speak on behalf of Cover Home Repair if anyone has any questions. Bill, if you could make a few short remarks regarding this item, that would be great.
Happy to do that. Thank you very much for the support the town has given us in the past, as well as the residents who have volunteered on our jobs and shopped or donated in our store. We average about 4 to 6 urgent repair jobs and weatherization requests in the town per year, and we spend between $4,000 and $6,000 on building materials. We're certainly not looking for the town to subsidize that entire cost, but a portion of it is a really big help, especially because this year we are faced with a 100% increase in building material costs, and that's very hard for us to manage right now. Plus, we have about 3 times as many requests for urgent repairs throughout the Upper Valley at this point in the year compared to other years, and so we're happy to answer any questions. This is our 23rd year, and again, thank you for the support from the community.
Thank you, Bill. Perfect length of time. I appreciate it. Any questions from attendees for Bill regarding Cover Home Repair? Excellent. Seeing none, we will move on to the next article. Article 5, shall the town vote to appropriate $1,694 to support the Green Mountain Economic Development Corporation, GMEDC? GMEDC promotes economic development for a district of 30 towns. Are there any questions? I don't think there's a formal presentation anticipated. Any questions about GMEDC? It looks like Gary Trashier has a question. Thomas, if you could unmute Gary or allow him to unmute himself.
Hi, I'm actually not Gary. You want to add me to my name to the minutes? This is also Ione Minot.
Great. Thank you, Ione.
So I'm just wondering, what has Green Mountain Economic Development Corporation done for Hartland lately? Do we know?
Dave, would you like to speak to that?
Green Mountain Economic Development, we have not leaned on them for support presently. We get a fair amount of planning and some economic development support from Two Rivers Ottaquechee Regional Commission. However, that being said, this is kind of just my observation in my position and having been in the Upper Valley for 5 years. The Green Mountain Economic Development Corporation, I think, is beneficial to the Upper Valley and some of our surrounding towns. And I think that they are available to Hartland if we decide to dabble in economic development to a greater degree. I think that they're aware of certain economic development grants that would be available to Hartland. So even though I don't think that we've leaned on them historically, regionally, I think there's a benefit to them. Again, kind of venturing into an opinion here, but again, it's from where I sit, and they're always available to town if necessary.
Okay, thank you. May I ask another question, Matt?
Yes, yes, please.
It goes back to Article 2. am I right in assuming that the difference between the amount that shall be raised by taxes and the extra, that brings it up to the 3,086,700, is that difference from grants for the Hartland Three Corners roadwork or what?
So no, the expenses in the grant revenue is not in the budget. In this fiscal year budget, we do have some expenses and revenue being made, although we haven't got into the heart of this. We'll be going out for a bond come wintertime. We don't expect to do the work this summer. We're eyeing next summer. So the bond revenue will essentially support that endeavor. And then as we spend it, we get the grant revenue back. That revenue is from, there's recreation revenue from recreation programs in that revenue. There's some revenue that we get from the three dams or one particular dam in North Hartland that's has a separate contract and is looked upon separately from just a tax bill. There's interest revenue, there's penalty revenue, there's some grants in there as well. So it's kind of a sprinkling of different items that make up that revenue line item or items.
That's all. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions on GMEDC? Okay, we're going to move on to Article 6. Oh, I noticed there's one person who is called in. If Thomas, if you could allow the person who called to unmute themselves, I just want to make sure that there aren't questions that person has from
Matt, they also need to hit *6 to unmute themselves, and they can hit *9 to raise a hand.
Got it. Oh,
well, I activated them, so to speak, but they disappeared.
Okay. Maybe they got their question answered. Great. Excellent. All right. So moving on to Article 6, shall the town vote to appropriate $200 to support the Green Mountain Retired Senior Volunteer Program, RSVP? Green Mountain RSVP supports those 55 and older who want to contribute to their communities through volunteering. I don't believe there is anyone who's planning to attend to speak on behalf of this article. Are there any questions about this article? All right. Seeing none, we will go on to Article 7. Article 7, shall the town vote to appropriate $200 to support Green Up Vermont, coming up, I believe, next Saturday. Green Up Vermont organizes a statewide cleanup day in May and raises awareness for a litter-free environment. I also don't believe that there is a person who is planning on speaking on behalf of Green Up Vermont. Are there any questions about Green Up Vermont? Okay, so seeing none, we will go on to Article 8. Article 8, shall the town vote to appropriate $500 to support the Hartland Community Food Shelf? The food shelf makes food available to those residents in need and provides healthy snacks to school children. I believe Judy Howland is with us, who could make some remarks if she so desires to explain this request and to answer questions. Judy, you're welcome to make some remarks. You're also welcome to pass unless people have questions.
Good morning. My name is Judy Howland, and I was asked to speak on behalf of the Hartland Community Food Shelf. I've been a volunteer there for several years. I don't even remember how long. I would like to point out that in the town report on page 72, Carmen Summersell wrote a summary of the work done by the food shelf during the year 2020. Carmen has since sold her property in town and moved to Windsor. She is also retired from her volunteer service at the food shelf. But I want to thank her for her years of service and helping to keep the food shelf going. I would also like to point out that the food shelf has benefited from having a website, which was established a couple of years ago by Suzanne Inglis. People can make a donation, a monetary donation to the food shelf by signing in on the website. Also, the food shelf has received prepared restaurant meals as part of the, I guess I always say, the reaction to the pandemic. Different restaurants are funded to provide individual meals, which are then frozen and stored for patrons of the food shelves around the state to pick up. We do continue the children's program. I think about 24 bags of food are sent home each week to students picked out, identified by the elementary school as needing extra food to get through the weekend. In closing, I would like to say thank you to Clyde Jenny, who served for 27 years as Hartland's town clerk. This has nothing to do with the food shelf, but now that I'm on, I want to say thank you, Clyde, and I wish you well in your retirement. And if there are any questions, I'll see if I can answer them.
About the food shelf, probably not about Clyde. So let's.
Correct.
Right. Okay, any questions about the food shelf? Okay, great. Judy, thank you so much for the report and the sentiments of Clyde. We will move on to Article 9. Article 9, shall the town vote to appropriate $13,500 to support the Aging in Hartland Community Nurse Program? The community nurse provides one-on-one services to homebound seniors. So I believe Kurt Peterson or Andrea Burns were hoping to join us to perhaps make a few remarks. It looks like Kurt, you have the floor.
Thank you, Matt. You're doing a fantastic job.
Thank you.
I'd like to address Hartland pre-town meeting, balloting info meeting. Thank you for this opportunity to ask the generous voters of Hartland, Vermont to appropriate $13,500 again this year to support aging in Hartland. Normally, this would be an actual town meeting in Damon Hall, and I would be able to see your faces. Statistically, at least 1 in 3 faces would shine with senior wisdom and maturity. 1,100 of our 3,300 residents are over the age of 65. You are our neighbors, our friends, and Aging in Hartland's clients. Some of us are lucky and have, at least for now, resources, good health, or a supportive family nearby watching out for us. Others face daily challenges such as a lack of transportation, a disability, a disabling illness, isolation and loneliness, food insecurity, housing issues, or financial distress. For 10 years, Aging in Hartland has been helping seniors with these challenges. We're an official nonprofit with a dozen directors, many who are seniors, and 24 volunteers serving in many ways, from delivering Meals on Wheels to arranging wheelchair ramp installations. We fund 3 part-time trained professional community nurses available to bring comfort, understanding, compassion, and links to healthcare, companionship, needed services, transportation to Hartland seniors in different circumstances. You enthusiastically appropriated $6,500 each year to support a single nurse, half the program cost, and our volunteers raised the other half from grants and your generous private donations. As seniors' needs quickly grew, so grew demands for our nurse and the need for more financial support. Last year, voters again enthusiastically raised our appropriation to $13,500 to support a second nurse, an equal amount to be raised by AIH volunteers. There is no traditional town meeting this year, but you will get the chance to approve Aging in Hartland's $13,500 appropriation again as a separate item on your ballot. Please vote to renew this needed financial support as we help Hartland seniors through another year. It will cost each person a little over $4 in taxes, a small price for bringing dignity, security, and comfort to your friends and neighbors and our clients. Thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. Are there any questions for Kurt or generally about aging in Hartland and the appropriation? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to Article 10. Again, if people have questions that come up further on, we're going to be flexible in allowing people to ask questions about other items, although we're going to try to keep it focused. Article 10, shall the town vote to appropriate $2,000 to support the Hartland Farmers Market? The Farmers Market offers a children's program where kids ages 5 to 12 learn about and eat fresh foods and receive market pop bucks to spend on produce. I don't think there's anyone here specifically to speak on behalf of the Hartland Farmers Market. Are there any questions about the Hartland Farmers Market and this appropriation? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to Article 11. Article 11, shall the town vote to appropriate $3,500 to support Hartland Mutual Aid? Hartland Mutual Aid is Hartland residents and neighbors volunteering to help neighbors. And I believe Kira Kelly is here to speak on behalf of Hartland Mutual Aid. And just a note, this is a new organizational request in case people were not familiar with it. Kira?
Thank you. Thanks everybody for having me here to speak. So I'll just briefly speak to mutual aid in case that's not a term that folks are familiar with. It's a practice that's been around for a long time, but gained widespread popularity across the country during the coronavirus pandemic. And that's why Hartland Mutual Aid formed as well. It was in response to this recognition that there's a lot of unmet needs in the community, and there's also a lot of surplus resources in that same community that could be reallocated to meet those needs. So for example, it's really like expanding the concept of family and turning it into seeing the whole town as an extension of yourself. And how easy is it for me, having grown up in Hartland, to call my dad and say, hey, I need a real quick hand with some project that I can't do by myself, and to have him come over and do that. And that people who maybe don't have their entire family all living within 5 miles of each other, maybe don't have that access and opportunity. And how can we create that through infrastructure and coordinated volunteers who are saying, sure, I'll freely give my time to my community without expecting a direct and equal reciprocal benefit in return, because I know what benefits my community actually does benefit me directly as well. And specifically about Heartland's Mutual Aid Project, we are 6 coordinating volunteers that manage a list of about 150 other volunteers. We're all volunteers. We intend to keep it that way. And what we do is we organize the resources and the volunteers on the list to fill in when we get requests from people in town, through our hotline that we manage, or through our form that we have online, or in response to the mailers that we mailed out that you might have gotten if you remember last year, a little postcard from us. And what we do is we essentially say, what do you need and how can we help you meet that need? And we work in conjunction with other incredible organizations in Hartland that already exist, like the Food Shelf and Aging in Hartland. And we say, how can we essentially use our resources and the volunteers on our list to plug into what's already there? And where are the gaps that might exist? Say somebody might not quite qualify for Aging in Hartland services. They're not quite aged enough. How can we use our resources to meet that same need and to kind of get people by that don't qualify for anything else, or that maybe don't meet the technical requirements of a formal program, but just could use an extra hand cleaning up their yard or going out to get groceries. And it's in part disaster response, but the hope is that it has the flexibility to carry on beyond that and to continue filling the roles that it has performed this past year. We organized a bunch of volunteers to help shift some of the school to outside classrooms and to finding building materials and volunteers. We have been working a lot with folks doing things like helping put their 911 signs up if they, for whatever reason, can't get on a ladder to nail it in where it needs to be. And so really, I guess we're looking for a grant to expand our accessibility so that we can make it easier for people to get involved, so that there's no financial barriers to participation. If somebody says, I want to help, but I can't afford to buy groceries or to buy tools or to, buy the supplies to make this project happen, but I do want to do it, that we could do that. We don't spend funds without the consent of the coordinating committee. So it's very controlled and very public. And speaking of which, we'd also love for more people to get involved. If you want to check out the mutual aid tab on the Hartland Library's website, we're always looking for more people and would love to have you get involved. So thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you, Kara. Are there any questions about Hartland Mutual Aid and this request for an appropriation? Any questions for Kira? It looks like Linda Genovese has raised her hand. And I assume that's Linda.
Yes, it is.
Hi, Linda. Go
Hi.
ahead.
Just reading through all the articles here, I see that there might be a lot of duplication in volunteer efforts here, and I would just hope that one organization would be more of a go-to place that would then make it easier for people who need services, who need some assistance, would find it easier because you've got churches, you've got the Aging in Hartland, you've got all sorts of programs. And if this organization would be one to be kind of a clearinghouse for a lot of other ones, that would be extremely helpful.
Great. Thank you, Linda. Kira, do you want to respond to that? Or it looks like Curtis, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, thank you so much, Linda, for that. You can see in the town report the appropriation request that we sent to the select board. I'm one of the coordinating volunteers with Hartland Mutual Aid. I'm also on the select board. So, but you can see in the request that we sent, one of the things we hope to do is to develop a public-facing website that coordinates all of the resources in town and puts them in one centralized place so that people who are in need of social or economic services can go to that one destination and find the different services that they qualify for and easily get in contact with those different services. So we are definitely hoping to have be able to serve as a sort of clearinghouse for this sort of information, Linda. So thank you very much for your comment.
Great. Linda, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Great. Excellent. Thank you, Curtis. Any other questions for Hartland Mutual Aid? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to Article 12. Article 12, shall the town vote to appropriate $14,500 to support the Hartland Rescue Squad? The Hartland Rescue Squad provides a rapid response and emergency care on scene while awaiting ambulance transport. I believe Alan Beebe was going to join us, possibly, if there were any questions. But presentation is not necessary if Alan is not here. Does anyone have any questions about Hartland Rescue Squad and this appropriation request? Okay. All right. We'll move on to Article 13, and our volunteer fire chief will be making a presentation as soon as I finish reading this article. Article 13, shall the town vote to appropriate $71,400 to support the Hartland Volunteer Fire Department, HVFD. The HVFD provides fire protection and emergency services for the town of Hartland. And with that, Thomas, if you can make John oh no, Dave, you're going to do the slide presentation. You're on mute, Dave. Dave, you're still on mute.
Looks like Dave's driving. Can you guys hear me?
I can, and Dave is back. Dave is back. Dave, you all set to drive and present?
Yes, I've actually figured out the technology here. So John will have full screen access here for viewing.
Isn't that always the way? All right. Over to you.
All right. Thank you very much. Alan Beebe is also a fire academy instructor, and he's conducting a live burn today in Pittsfield. So I can answer any questions on the rescue squad as we get through that. It was time for a new picture, and some of our new members are on top of our new fire engine up on Weed Road, I believe. There's actually a rainbow in the background that didn't come in on this, but it was an awesome picture. So this is Jaden and Mark. And they've been great new members for us. You can go to the next slide. We have several new members that I've highlighted this year in yellow. We've got a really good crew, and I know I say that every year, but we've been really busy this year, and it's been great to have a bunch of new blood in and active. Cooper and Miriam have joined us, or Cooper and River Miriam have joined us from North Heartland. Shannon has come here from Colorado. Jaden is in school for emergency management, just graduating, and she is a dynamic, awesome personality. Ryan came over from Plainfield with fire credentials, and Lydia lives just down the road from me, and she's just completed her EMT. The rest of those are some familiar faces, and we love them all. Next slide, please. So we did 134 calls in 2020. For the most part, things look about the same. What's of interest here to me is that we went to more fires in 2020 than we have in the last few years, shown in red, and a few less accidents on the interstate and in town. About the same amount of just overall support for wires down, agency assists, helping out the rescue squad and stuff like that. But definitely some more fires of both the brush fire, neighboring town fires, and structure fires in our own town. Next slide. This is the rescue squad, and we cross-pollinate a little bit. So all the folks in red are also on the fire department. And we have a new member, James, who's also our animal control officer. and he's an advanced EMT. I believe worked in Woodstock for a bit before joining us, and we've got a great crew there. If you go to the next slide, in fact, we even have 3 paramedics, which is just worth mentioning, which is outstanding for a volunteer department, and that's in large part because they are paid paramedics for agencies that they work for full time. Our rescue squad trend is unfortunately pretty apparent. More calls than ever in 2020, and we're already on a trend as of the end of March anyway, to even potentially beat this in a bad way this year. So just a lot of calls. A lot of people ask me what the nature of the calls are that's driving this up, and I don't have a good answer for you because it's hard to search that, because natures of calls can change from the way they're dispatched and coded to what they actually end up being. But suffice it to say, the rate of assistance is going up. A lot of these calls, some of the calls are frequent or recurring needs. And speaking to the mutual aid discussion before, I will say that we're getting better about reaching out to Aging in Hartland, town nurse, senior solutions, and trying to coordinate when we're seeing recurring needs at a single residence. So thanks for your help on that, Curtis. Next slide, please. So a lot of things happened in 2020, and I just put a boring bullet slide together here. We had the Depot Road detour. Interestingly, not too long after that bridge was closed down, we had a locomotive fire. So we had to go the long way around to that one, and I'll show you a picture of that. Martinsville Road got shut down briefly, and we had to relocate just to support the dozen or so houses that were cut off because of the covered bridge load capacity and height limit on one end of Martinsville Road. And the school at the other. We ended up working with Twin State, who donated storage of one of our tankers, actually, which acted as a tanker and engine at that facility while the road was closed, so we could do an emergency response to those houses that were cut off during that time. We did a huge water supply drill at Britton's Lumber, partly to support any sort of future emergency need there, but also because out back of Britton's Lumber, there's now I'm going to get the number wrong, but I think it's a 20,000 or 30,000 gallon propane bulk refill station back there. And we needed to demonstrate that we could provide enough water flow for a period of time. And so it was a good excuse to get all the neighboring departments, over 18 tankers and pumpers from 10 different towns participated in that. And that's what we did as a makeup for not being able to do a parade in town. We got all of the fire departments together and actually got to play. So, so we also refurbished 2 dry hydrants, and we used some state grants to do that. Close to $10,000 was expended on that, and I think it's 75% of that was reimbursed from the state of Vermont. We did not do fire prevention this year, which is something we all really enjoy doing, and working with the students and bringing those student messages home to families. But we'll hopefully get right back into that next year. I will say that for those of you that got to see Santa, who was a little delayed on his tour of town, we didn't let COVID slow down our tour with Santa in town. So that was fun to do, and we were very grateful for his visit. We did install a generator that now combines emergency power to the fire department and highway, and that's been working great. And it was long overdue, and I'm glad we did it. And it's already kicked in a few times and sort of helped everything go smoothly. In fact, if it wasn't for a glowing light, sometimes we wouldn't even know that we're without power. So, we are proposing a 2% budget increase, which is sort of the anticipated inflation rate from 2020 to 2021. So we're moving up just incrementally from $70,000 requested last year to $71,400. And we too are grateful for the generosity of Hartland for their continued support of the fire department and rescue squad. Next slide. Bigger pictures than Dave's. So thanks for going full screen on this. This was our locomotive fire just off of Ferry Road in Hartland. It's really easy to get to when Depot Road's open. Hartford beat us to our own fire in town for this one. And they came down through Pike's Pit there, the Hartland Pit. And I don't know, for most of you guys probably got to do the detour, but it was a neat drive through a quarry to get there. A little less fun in a fire truck in the middle of the night. But this was an interesting one and a first for me. It's hard to call a tow truck for a locomotive, but the rail company did an excellent job and isolated this so it wasn't in danger of anything else, and then towed it away at the end. They say they actually put this back in service probably within a week or so, and it was so this, I guess, is not an uncommon thing in the rail industry. Next slide. This is Matt Dow from D&D Excavation doing the 160 Hartland Hill Road pond, which had become mucked in. A lot of sediment collection in a fairly shallow pond over a long time. Matt did an excellent job with this, and we got engineering assistance from the state of Vermont. Troy Dare runs the dry hydrant grant program, and this was one of the more challenging ones. You can see he's got his big machine in there. He did not get stuck, but there was a lot of sloppy muck to move and sort of put up on the banks. And he built himself a sturdy platform so we can go back in there now and refurbish it in 10 years. And he can stand in a good spot with his machine and scrape it back out again. So we've demonstrated adequate flow from this, and it's nice to have it back in service after being out of service for a number of years. Next slide, please. This is Hanover. We had 74. This is the first fire I've ever been invited to the night before and not asked to show up until the next morning. There was a lightning strike in the back lot of an old abandoned quarry in Hanover, and it was well executed, well coordinated, and we were all well fed, spending I think somewhere between 6 and 8 hours of some pretty grueling work on a very steep hillside. It was a very steep, deep peat fire. That lightning had really gotten down underground and started an underground fire in this area. So long time to put it out, but a lot of good camaraderie here. Next slide, please. I think a lot of you got to meet Santa, and we were very grateful. And his Christmas spirit was definitely stronger than COVID this year. Next slide. So our apparatus remains the same this year as last year. And this slide sometimes is confusing, but what it's intended to show with the skinny green line is where we are today and what the next piece of equipment is that we're likely to replace. And that next piece of equipment is down at the bottom, our forestry. We're trying to get 23 years of service out of it. And we have a little flexibility. It's in pretty good shape. All of our apparatus is going in next week to get inspected at Sable and Sons, and that's when we often learn of some gremlins that are sleeping in our different vehicles. But we hope that we're going to get a few more years of life. But we are putting a committee together to replace the forestry with a new vehicle. Engine 2 would be the next vehicle to be replaced. That's in North Hartland, Tanker 1 is in pretty good shape. It's probably halfway through its life. Our engine 1 still feels brand new to us and is serving the purpose that we hoped it would, replacing our old heavy rescue truck with a single heavy duty vehicle. And then our Tanker 2 is our first 2,000 gallon water supply tanker, and it's brand new, still has that new truck smell, and we hope to get many more years of life out of it. Next slide, please. So the big expenses coming up are going to be the forestry and the engine. And I keep putting replaced furnaces at the stations on there just to try to keep Murphy away. But we've had no problems with the furnaces, but they are both pretty old. So we wouldn't be surprised if we replace one of those. The other thing I didn't put on this slide that I'll mention in case you see, we are looking at bids to redo the front ramp of the North Hartland Fire Station, which has developed a very steep sink in it. We actually get really close to scraping the bottom of our trucks when we back in. And the quotes will involve basically a full refurbishment of that front ramp to tame that down a little bit. And we're hoping to cover that with a combination of donation and operating expenses from this year, and not dip into our capital expense fund, which would need a town vote to do that. So this will be hopefully self-financed on that one. Next slide, please. Just a few reminders. Dave hit a few of these, but brush fire season is not quite past us. We actually are in a high brush fire condition as of the state's email this morning. Some places are greened up nicely and it's lovely to see, and other places are a little behind and maybe pretty dry, but we're getting through green up, but we're not quite there yet. So please be alert and report smoke or any unusual conditions that you see around. We do ask people to call in a burn permit no matter what really you're burning, just so we're aware and we can communicate with you what the hazard situation is and whether it's safe to issue a permit or not. We also like to just check in and see what you're burning and try to do our best to keep neighbor relations happy so that people aren't getting smoked out of their houses and getting persistent problems there. It was mentioned that there's help available to put up your 911 address. Ironically, the fire chief's 911 address just fell down and I can't find it. So I'll be coming to the town manager looking for a new 911 address. The town office can help you with that if you need a retroreflective address. We do ask you to put it out near the bottom of your driveway so we can see it as we're approaching your house responding from the fire station or stations. We've had several cases over the last few years of carbon monoxide and smoke detectors going off and people calling and us finding that, yes, there really is carbon monoxide in your house, or yes, your chimney really is plugged and there are dangerous fumes getting into your house. So I know it sounds repetitive to keep saying this, especially as a fire chief. I can't say it enough. These really do save lives. We really ask you to replace your, check them, replace your batteries at least once a year, and just make sure everything's working. There is more and more use of Knox boxes in town. We got pretty serious about key security when the bank went in. We have a vault system that's auditable, digital, and can tell us who took the key out to go open one of these. This is a great way to let us get into your house in an emergency without having to break your windows and doors to get in if you're not home. You can go onto this website, you can select Hartland as the town, and you can actually buy one of these for yourself, and the fire department gets notified, and you call us and we'll come out and unlock it with our master key and put your set of keys in it so we can get into your house if needed. This is you don't need the fire department involvement except for the final installation. Next slide, please. So we always can use more volunteers. We like to start young, but we also like anyone. You got to be over 18 if you want to do, basically because of insurance reasons. But there are ways to get involved through a cadet program that's largely run out of Windsor now, if you've got young ones that are interested. Our daytime response is limited, but with our new members, we actually have slightly better coverage than we had in the past. We are dependent on a mutual aid system that the fire department uses, where other towns respond to us and we go to other towns as needed to cover any gaps. It's a pretty large time commitment. We would ask any serious member that's interested in doing firefighting to go through a fairly intensive Firefighter 1 curriculum. And there is a course coming up, probably going to be hosted in Springfield if the state approves it. And we have, I think, 4 or 5 members of our own department, and we're hoping to get up to at least 25 or 30 members in that class. It should be excellent. Springfield has a really good training opportunity down there. But there's lots of other ways to help. We certainly don't just do fires, and we appreciate any help we can get. Next slide. This I'll let you read yourself. It's just a bunch of facts that I've presented in the past. Over 70% of firefighters in the US are volunteers, and every 24 seconds, the fire department responds to a fire somewhere in the nation. That's it. Thank you very much. I will take any questions.
Great. Thank you, John. Are there questions for the fire chief? Rob and Jen. And Jennifer.
Hi, this is Jennifer Grant. Just curious, dry hydrant is a new term to me. Does that mean a hydrant that's connected to like a pond as opposed to a water main? I was just curious to know.
Yeah, that's exactly right. In North Heartland, we have 14 hydrants, pressurized hydrants that the North Heartland Water Group maintains. That's not very many hydrants, and the way we get our water in the rest of the town is we suck it out of ponds. So a dry hydrant means the plumbing in the pipe is dry, and we use a vacuum on the fire truck to suck the water from the water source up into the hydrant and into the engine.
Great.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer. Mary, looks like she has her hand up.
I do. Hi, John. Do you have enough dry hydrants throughout the town, or is the fire department looking for more? And can they be sited in a brook, or no? Is it just ponds?
So the fire department is actually the Station 1 hydrant, the main hydrant by the highway, has a dry hydrant in the brook, and that's definitely an opportunity. We have to be careful and engineer those a little bit better for different water flow levels. So there's a low level strainer in that brook, and that's been re-engineered a few times. We have approximately 14 dry hydrants in the town. We've had a few individuals call and ask to put in hydrants on their property and self-fund them privately. I think the most recent one of those was there's discussion of a new one going in on Horton Hill Lane in the next few years. There's also one out at the very end of Densmore Hill. If we're looking for grant funding, we try to look carefully at the map and make sure we're covering an area better than we're currently covered. And we have a zone map at the fire station that I can show you to kind of show where they are right now. But we're always looking to add more. We can never have enough water access in town.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mary. Any other questions for Chief Sanders? Okay, great, John, thank you. And I'm going to just give us a level setting on the day. We are that completes Article 13 out of 31 articles. Given the fact we have 19 minutes in our anticipated schedule, we're going to continue to move right along. And I'm going to ask that unless someone who is here on behalf of an organization feels really compelled to make a presentation, that we just, I'll read the articles, ask if there are any questions, and if there are, be able to answer them rather than having each organization give a full-blown presentation, especially if you have been an organization that's been funded historically by the town, if that's all right with everyone. So I'm going to keep moving along. I'll also point out that even though we are not quite halfway in the articles, the two that we're going to have formal presentations, we have already gotten through, including the mutual aid, which was a new organization that I wanted to make sure had time to discuss. Okay. So Article 14, shall the town vote to appropriate $1,710 to support Headrest? Headrest helps those in crisis and supports every stage of a person's recovery. Are there any questions about Headrest and this appropriation? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to Article 15. Article 15, shall the town vote to appropriate $3,453 to support healthcare and rehabilitation services, HCRS. HCRS is a comprehensive mental health provider serving residents of Windsor and Windham counties. Are there any questions about HCRS or this appropriation? Okay. Seeing none, we will move on to Article 16. Article 16, shall the town vote to appropriate $2,000 to support Mount Ascutney Prevention Partnership, MAP. MAP promotes health and positive environments for youth. Are there any questions on Article 16 or about the MAP program? Excellent. Dave, if you can scroll a bit, we'll go to the next group. Article 17, shall the town vote to appropriate $345 to support the Public Health Council of the Upper Valley? Public Health Council of the Upper Valley is a coalition of advocates for public health issues in the Upper Valley region. This is the other new appropriation there was not an appropriation made to this organization last year. Are there any questions about this appropriation or organization? Any questions? Okay, as I've mentioned before, if you have a question, something that comes to you on an earlier article, because we're moving quickly, don't be afraid to raise your hand. We can certainly go back. Article 18, shall the town vote to appropriate $1,500 to support Senior Solutions, parentheses, Council on Aging for Southeastern Vermont. Senior Solutions promotes the well-being and dignity of older adults. Are there any questions about Article 18 or Senior Solutions? I see Susan Boutwell, but I think that's Mark who would like to make a comment.
Yes, this is Mark Boutwell. Thank you very much. I'll be brief. I'm excited. I am a Hartland resident, and I'm excited to announce myself today as the new Executive Director of Senior Solutions. And I'll just comment briefly that as an agency on aging and a social service agency, we work very closely with all the social service agencies listed here. John Sanders referenced us in terms of our coordination with the fire department and the rescue squad. We work closely with Aging in Hartland and many other social service agencies in the town. And just very briefly, one of the important supports we provide is support and funding to Meals on Wheels. Last year, Senior Solutions supported the delivery of 2,855 meals on wheels in Hartland. And if you think maybe that's about $10 per meal, that's close to $28,000 value of meals that we supported delivery in Hartland. So we appreciate your previous support and look forward to a continued collaboration with all the other social service agencies in town. Thank you.
Mark, thank you. Congratulations on your new position and appreciate the overview. Excellent. Any questions for Mark or on Senior Solutions? Okay, great. Moving on to Article 19. Shall the town vote to appropriate $3,220 to support Southeastern Vermont Community Action, SEVCA? SEVCA works with individuals to reduce the effects of poverty and create self-sufficiency. Any questions about SEVCA or that appropriation? Okay, seeing none. Article 20, shall the town vote to appropriate $1,500 to support the Special Needs Support Center, SNSC? SNSC works with children and adults who have disabilities to foster independence. Any questions about Article 20, SNSC, and the appropriation? All right, moving on to Article 21. Shall the town vote to appropriate $1,500 to support Tri-Valley Transit, formerly Stagecoach Services? Tri-Valley Transit provides public transportation in the Upper Valley region. Are there any questions about Article 20, Tri-Valley Transit, or the appropriation? Okay. Seeing none, we will move on to Article 22. Article 22, shall the town vote to appropriate $125 to support Mover Rockingham, formerly The Current? Mover Rockingham provides public transportation in southern Windsor County and Windham County. Are there any questions about this appropriation to Mover Rockingham? Yes, Sarah Bruce appears to have a question. Sarah, go ahead.
Thank you. I don't remember this one from previous years, and there are other transportation options, but my biggest question, is Hartland in southern Windsor County?
Dave, do you want to take a shot at this one? I don't think there's anyone from Mover that was planning to join us today.
So I believe Mover Rocking. So we're on the fringe of southern Windsor. Windsor and Hartland, we're kind of a little bit in between. Southern Windsor tends to be more Springfield South, and the greater Upper Valley area tends to be Hartford and Lebanon and Hanover and Norwich. So we're a little bit in between. But I do believe Mover does service the park and ride area. So they do come into the park and ride and service Windsor and Hartland to that degree.
Thank you.
Any other questions about this article, appropriation, and Mover Rockingham? Great. All right, so moving on to Article 23, shall the town vote to appropriate $200 to support the Family Place? The Family Place operates programs designed to support and promote families and children. Are there any questions about this appropriation or Family Place? Okay. Seeing none, Article 24, shall the town vote to appropriate $2,500 to support the Ottaquechee Health Foundation? The Ottaquechee Health Foundation promotes programs that help individuals and families meet their healthcare needs. Are there any questions about this article? Mark, I know you are on tap to answer questions. You're welcome to, we're trying to move right along, but if you want to make some comments, that's fine.
Thank you, Matt. I'll just say, as a board member for the Ottaquechee Health Foundation, last year, the foundation provided 25 grants to Heartlanders amounting to $30,000 worth of healthcare services that we assisted Heartlanders in receiving. Thank you very much.
That is some simple math. Great. Thank you, Mark. So any other questions about the $2,500 appropriation to support the Ottaquechee Health Foundation? Excellent. Thank you, Mark. Article 25, shall the town vote to appropriate $160 to support the Vermont Center for Independent Living? The Vermont Center for Independent Living works with those who have disabilities or who are deaf to live more independently. Any questions about this appropriation or the Vermont Center for Independent Living? Great. If there, again, feel free to come back around if we're moving too fast. Article 26, shall the town vote to appropriate $10,500 to support the Visiting Nurse and Hospice, BNH, for Vermont and New Hampshire. BNH is a healthcare organization providing quality home health and and hospice care to people of all ages and at all stages in life. Any questions about Article 26, the appropriation for B&H? Okay, not seeing any. We'll move on to Article 27. Article 27, shall the town vote to appropriate $900 to support Volunteers in Action? Volunteers in Action work with the elderly and disabled to help them stay at home. Any questions about Volunteers in Action and the $900 requested appropriation? Okay. We'll move on to Article 28. Article 28, shall the town vote to appropriate $1,000 to the White River Council on Aging, Bugby Senior Center. Bugby Senior Center works with those 60 or older and their families with nutrition, exercise, and social services. Any questions about the White River Council on Aging, the Bugby Center, and the $1,000 requested appropriation? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to Article 29. Article 29, shall the town vote to appropriate $2,000 to support Windsor County Mentors? Windsor County Mentors matches adult volunteers or mentors with children throughout the county. Any questions about Article 29 and the appropriation to Windsor County Mentors? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to Article 30. Shall the town vote to appropriate $500 to support Women's Information Services, Inc., known as WISE? WISE provides advocacy and support for victims of gender-based violence. Any questions about Article 30, the appropriation to Women's Information Service, Inc., otherwise known as WISE? I see Kate from WISE is with us, and feel free to make some brief remarks.
I promise to spare you my comments, happy to, but I live with my family on Brownsville Road and have worked at WISE since 2007, and just wanted to be sure people know that I'm here now, or really anytime if there are questions.
Great. That's Kate Rodenberg. Thank you. And thank you for your service. Any questions for Kate or about WISE and the requested appropriation? Great. Moving on to Article 31. Shall the town vote to appropriate $300 to support the Woodstock Area Job Bank? The Woodstock Area Job Bank brings together people who need work with those who are looking for workers. Any questions about Article 31, the Woodstock Area Job Bank, or the appropriation? Any questions at all? Okay, so that brings us to the end of the articles. Keeping in mind that we go back to the agenda to finish that out, are there any remaining questions about those articles, any of the articles that were warned for any of the folks who presented or members of the select board? Okay, seeing none, we will go back to the agenda. The item on the agenda that we are on now is the discussion of other non-binding business. Is there any other non-binding business to come before us at this informational meeting? Okay, seeing none, I think we can take a motion to adjourn from a member of the select board, I think is the appropriate process. Phil, are you moving to adjourn?
I would love to move to adjournment.
Excellent. Phil Hobby has moved to adjourn. I I think does there need to be a second, Dave? I'm not usually doing this for select board. So is there a second to adjourn?
I'll second. This is Mary.
Mary Bryant has seconded. All those in favor, please raise your hand.
Curtis, aye.
Phil, aye.
Mary, aye.
All right, we will.
Gordon, aye.
The aye. And Mark.
Martha, aye.
Great. And at 10:59 exactly, we are adjourned from the town informational meeting. I would like to ask for biological and gravitational purposes a 5-minute break before we start the school meeting. So we will be back at 11:05. And we will carry on with Nikki Buck and the school board at that time.
Great job, Matt. Thank you.
Thank
Great.
you, everyone.
Very good job.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
So Thomas, in preparation for the school meeting, Christine Bourne is going to share her screen. I don't know if you can get to her.
Yeah.
Morning, everyone.
Hey, David. We are right on time. I'm impressed.
I was worried for a minute.
I was too. I was looking at the watch while John was presenting and I was like, ah.
That was cool. It wrapped up right on the minute.
Yeah.
Let's do this every year.
I actually like seeing people.
I do too.
I do too.
But I also like spending the last couple hours actually getting work done in my garden.
Yeah.
I listen.
Stays an option.
Mm-hmm. So I don't have access to share my screen yet.
Okay.
Which I'll pull up as soon as I get it.
When it comes time to present, I'll make you the host then.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. It is beautiful out. Let's see if we can move fast and get outside.
Yeah, we don't have many articles, right? So
No, we've got 40 slides, but hopefully we can go through those slides fairly quickly.
yeah. I think it's so interesting on the municipal side, you know, they're not spending nearly as much money, but you have to go through all those articles. It just takes so much time. And then, you know, we come in with a fairly decent expenditure and, you know, but I think that the presentation is solid. I mean, I appreciate what Christine and Nikki, what you did. I mean, I think that's really helpful.
And Angie.
Sorry, and Angie, exactly. And Christine, you have those other articles on your PowerPoint as well, correct? Yeah.
I do.
Okay, Nikki, I think everyone is held fast from the school board and from the presentation side. So I think we are ready to get rolling. And you included in the PowerPoint deck the actual agenda as well as the articles, because again, for those of you, I don't think anyone new has joined just for the school meeting, but this is not a town meeting. This is an informational session, which is what we usually have for the schools, since for at least the last decade, school budgets have been voted on, maybe 2 decades. I'm aging myself, has been voted on by Australian ballot, but this is the traditional informational session to provide information on the school meeting. It is officially a school board meeting, but we will be facilitating it like we did the town informational meeting. And so we will be using an agenda and then moving to the articles themselves. So Thomas, if you want to, Nikki, who's going to be driving?
Christine is going to be driving the presentation.
Great. So Thomas, if you can give Christine the power to share the slides, I will officially call this meeting the school informational meeting to order. And Christine, do you have?
I do. I'm just
Great.
thinking, is it better to do the desktop view or the application view? Anybody know? We don't use Zoom very often.
If you're doing the share screen, you probably want to do the desktop view.
Okay. All right, we'll go for it.
It just be warned that if you bring up other things on your desktop, it will then appear and be shared with everyone. Not that ever happens.
So just to make sure, do you see the presentation in full
Sure
screen?
do.
All right, great. All right,
Excellent.
Nikki's going to begin. Oh,
Great.
no, Matt,
Well,
you're
no,
gonna
no.
you're going to read the articles. Yes, here we
Yep,
go.
we've got to do this. So if we can go, there is, so I'm going to jump right into the articles themselves. There is a formal agenda for this meeting, but I believe the agenda is to call it and then get right to the articles. So we're going to move to that second item on the agenda. And so Article 1 is to elect the town school district officers for the ensuing year. This is done by Australian ballot, as it always is, and is available on people's ballot. And then the second article is to act on the reports of the school district officers for the past year. This is also done by Australian ballot. I'm sorry, I'm going a little bit quickly. If anyone has any questions on either of these articles, please feel free to raise your hand. Okay, seeing none, we will move on to Article 3. And Article 3 is to vote for the school district to pay taxes to the town treasurer, such taxes to be collected on the same schedule voted at the town meeting. And this is done again by Australian ballot. Any questions about this article? Note there is an explanation on the slide for those who are interested or have questions. Any questions about Article 3 from any of the attendees?
Matt, I would chime in on this one.
Great.
I cannot find my raise hand button, so I'm a little embarrassed on that. John was trying to help me, but we're not getting anywhere. I just wanted to, there were some questions on the listserv related to this. And so I wanted to just highlight that the way that you should read this article is to vote for the school district. And when you read the word school district, you read it as all of the taxpayers residing in the district. It is not read as the school itself. So if you read it that way, the vote is for all the residents within the school district to pay taxes to the town treasurer. And then such taxes will be collected on the same schedule as voted at town meeting. So I just wanted to clarify that, because once that was clarified to me, it made a lot of sense. Thank you.
Great. Any additional questions on Article 3? or this process? Excellent. All right, then we will move on to Article 4. And this is the capital reserve articles, which is to vote that the school district is authorized to borrow money from the capital reserve fund or a commercial lender in anticipation of taxes to meet the requirements of the school district for the ensuing year, and to authorize the execution and delivery of notes or orders to the school district. And again, this is voted on by Australian ballot. Are there any questions regarding this article? Okay, seeing none, on to Article 5, which is the hefty article. I'm sorry, Jim has raised his hand. Jim, you should be allowed to unmute yourself and speak.
Sorry, Matt, my question is actually going to be on Article 5, so I can wait if you want to read the article first.
So what we're going to do with Article 5, and I will read the article. We will then have a presentation from the representatives from the school district. And then I think it would be appropriate to take questions after that, if that's acceptable to everyone. Great. Okay. So Article 5, shall the voters of the Hartland School District approve by Australian ballot the school board to expend $9,028,704, which is the amount the school board has determined to be necessary for the ensuing fiscal year. It is estimated that this proposed budget, if approved, will result in education spending of $19,770.23 per equalized pupil. This projected spending per equalized pupil is 3.59% higher than the spending for the current year. This will be voted on by Australian ballot, but for some background and explanation on this, and we're going to use this for other updates on the school in general, I'm going to, so Nikki, I'm officially turning it over to you, and we'll have you guide to the other folks who will be participating in the presentation.
Thank you, Matt, and great job earlier today. So I'm going to turn it over to some of our other school leaders in a few minutes, actually after this slide. But I just we've done some really exciting work this year, in the last year and a half, in developing the portrait of a graduate. And this work started in June of 2019, and we managed to continue it during the pandemic. And it culminated in a strategic plan that was approved in November of 2020. This is really huge. It's huge work. It involved a lot of people that are on this call today, a lot of community members throughout the supervisory union. And we want to take some time to present it to you today because this is revolutionary in the way that we are hoping to change the way we teach our kids in our schools and to really make them ready for the future. So during all of our work, the communities within the supervisory union created 5 competencies that were critical that all of our graduates have these capabilities. And those are empathy, perseverance, integrity, communication, and critical thinking. And I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention. Angie Ledoux is our director of curriculum, and she's going to present how we got to this process, how we went through this process, and how we got to this portrait, and then that led to the strategic plan. And I'm going to turn it over to Angie now. So you're up, Angie.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm also a Hartland resident, so I'm very happy to be here representing our supervisory union. And I hope that by the end of my portion of the presentation, you can understand why we're so excited about the direction that we're headed in. In the spring of 2019, the administrative team attended a workshop that was sponsored by Windsor Central, where Woodstock High School is. And their community had completed their portrait of a graduate process earlier that year. They were so excited about that work. We were very encouraged by the work that they had done and the promise that it showed in terms of really creating a brand new vision for what education can be for all of our students. So we brought our ideas to the board at our SU annual board meeting, and the board was 100% behind our work. Well, maybe not 100%, but they gave us the go ahead, and we were encouraged. So we worked with a consultant team from Battelle for Kids, and they have done a lot of portrait work across the nation. And we were very surprised to learn that the fact that we had 60 plus members of all 4 of our communities participate in our Portrait of a Graduate process, our consultant kept saying how awesome that was, and that even systems that are 10 times as big as ours have had fewer members showing up to share in the work. So the process is depicted in this graphic. It shows you how we started at a very broad overview of what our students will inherit when they graduate from our system and enter the workforce. And through a process that included the presentation of information and then gathering feedback from all the members that were in the meeting, our consultant would help us to clarify and identify what we thought were the most important skills, attitudes, and dispositions, as Nikki read the 5 competencies to you earlier. In January of 2020, the portrait was accepted by the SU board. So then next slide, please, Christine. Then began, okay, so now we have this lovely portrait. What do we do with it? How do we make this happen? And how do we bring it to our practice so that we are really changing and impacting our students? So this is the phase called the strategic planning phase. And so it started in January 2020. Right away, we were sending all kinds of data from across the supervisory union to our consultant, and he was collating this data and putting it together. And he was poised to present the data to us March 12th. As you know, the pandemic hit at that time, and we ended up canceling that meeting. But I want you to know how proud we are of the fact that we had team members still willing to do the work at the end of May. So after we had been doing the remote learning and we realized that there were still people that were willing to do the work, we had about 30 members. Some of those were members who were new to the portrait process, and some were team members of the Portrait of a Graduate team. They came together to start the strategic planning process. Next slide, please, Christine. The strategic planning process, I think my slide got a little bit funky there, but what it would show you is that the strategic planning process, the most important part is really the text here. It just shows you that the process was very similar to the process we used with the portrait. It started with, we looked at that data, we determined the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats based on that current state analysis that our consultant provided us with. And then we slowly narrowed it down to what our priorities were, what conditions we wanted to create so that our students could graduate with proficiency in those 5 areas of the portrait. So we identified 4 goal areas: student success, culture, student wellness and engagement, and information and communication. I'm just going to read you the goal areas. Next slide, please. So this first area includes student success and engagement. The WSESU will improve students' learning experiences because the personal, educational, vocational, and civic successes of our students are increasingly challenged in our rapidly changing world. This includes work on a learning framework, an assessment system, and extended learning opportunities. Next slide, please, Christine. The engagement portion of this is embodied in this statement. It's not about us without us. WSCSU will further integrate the whole student in their education so that students increasingly see relevance, purpose, and connection between their learning experiences and their individual and collective lives. The goals in this area include improving student voice and choice opportunities, providing flexible pathways for students, for all students across the supervisory unions and student advisory boards. Next slide, please, Christine. The culture and student wellness part of the plan includes strengthening and broadening the connections between and among all staff and the core work of education in pursuit of greater staff engagement, well-being, innovation, inclusion, and resolve. This includes developing a portrait of a WSESU member, designing and training our staff in collaborative practices, Big Ideas Summit, which is an annual innovation creation process, and diversity. You should notice or be aware that much of this work has already started. We have flexible pathways in our Windsor school. We have extended learning opportunities, which is something that schools have always done. Maybe not so much during the pandemic, but prior to the pandemic, this would include opportunities for students to leave, to learn, field trips, that sort of thing. And of course, our equity work that our SU has been engaged in the last year. Next slide, please. The student wellness portion of this goal is that the SU will further integrate the whole student into their education so that students increasingly see relevance, purpose, and connection between their learning experiences and in their individual and collective lives. And we will do that by supporting student mental health and providing social emotional leadership. Just so you know, this a little side, our recovery planning efforts include student engagement, academic success, and student mental health. The alignment between recovery planning and our strategic plan could not be more perfect. Next slide, please. The third goal, or the fourth goal area, is information and communication. And this is where our SU will improve the quality and effectiveness of its two-way communication so that stakeholder trust, understanding, and support will continue to advance the education of and the opportunities for our students. This includes information and communications leadership, a data leader, strategic planning, progress monitoring, student interest inventories, and communication plans. Next slide, please, Christine. So if you would like to learn more about our strategic plan, I've included a link here if you wanted to jot that down, or you could just send me an email at aladue@wsesu.net. Thank you and have a great day.
So at this point, Christine is going to start presenting. Christine is our principal at Hartland Elementary School, and she has been principal, this is now her 4th year. So she's a long-serving principal in the school, and she's about to give a great presentation of where we are.
All right, thanks, Nikki and Angie, and thanks.
Christine, you're a little quiet, actually.
Okay, let me, I think it's my headphones. Let me unplug and you can tell me if that's better. Hear me better?
Yes, much better. Thank you.
Okay, I'm thinking they've had about 15 months of use now, so time for a new pair. Well, I had said thank you to Angie and to Nikki and to all of the community members and parents that are at the meeting. I wish I could see you, but this is the best we can do for now, so we're making do. I have the honor of sharing a little bit about where we're headed at Hartland and the future of education, and that's really exciting for me. So in a report I recently read from 2016, not long ago, it stated that 65% of students entering grade school today, they're going to ultimately end up working in completely new jobs or job types that don't exist yet. This is both really frightening and really exciting news. So now more than ever, we need to provide learning experiences for our students that not only provide for the acquisition of rigorous academic content, but they must also be more intentional about fostering the 21st century skills that our young people are going to need to survive in this complex, rapidly changing world. So our students must leave us being able to apply content knowledge to real world situations, collaborate to solve problems, and communicate effectively. As Nikki and Angie shared, WSESU has completed a process with the participation of many community members and stakeholders that helped us identify those 5 core competencies and our goals within the strategic plan. And now the exciting work of preparing our kids for the future begins. You may be wondering, what is that? What is she talking about? What does that look like? Well, our goal is to embed the competencies, empathy, critical thinking, integrity, perseverance, and communication into teaching and learning processes and practices, and to provide students with instruction that's rigorous, equitable, and prepares them for college, a career, and ultimately for success in life. So how do we embed the portrait of a graduate competencies and shift our practices to prepare students for the future? We're going to take a deeper learning approach, and deeper learning experiences provide students the opportunity to develop the competencies through self-directed learning, interdisciplinary work, project-based learning, place-based outdoor education, and real-world authentic learning opportunities. This work has started and will continue to grow as we shift our practices to a more integrated and student-driven approach. So let's take a little peek at what it looks like in practice. So what does it look like? It looks like teachers working together to design curriculum with flexible learning opportunities for students that provide engaging ways to demonstrate knowledge and higher order thinking. In this slide, you see our 3rd grade teacher, Mrs. Skihan, integrating math, art, reading, writing, and social studies within a carnival design unit. In this unit, students design their own carnivals. They learn about area and perimeter, 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional shapes, mapping skills, and they also coded Ozobots, these little machines to travel throughout their carnivals. And in the future, if COVID allows, and we hope it does, the class would actually like to build a carnival outside on the playground for all students to enjoy. So we really hope that happens. Deeper learning looks like our students becoming leaders in their own education. Teachers are providing more and more opportunities for our students to share their thinking and learn from each other. Discourse is an important part of learning, and students are being asked to defend their thoughts and ideas using evidence on a regular basis. In this picture, a 1st grader uses math vocabulary and manipulatives to explain and defend why 64 is greater than 46. Her peers are able to ask questions and challenge her thinking. In this photo on the left, you see our middle level math teacher, Mr. Michael Butts. Mr. Butts works hard to make sure math has real world application. During the math unit depicted on this slide, Mr. Butts taught 8th grade math students how to construct linear functions on relevant topics. The student in this slide figured out how much money he would make in a year if he was paid the current minimum wage. Other students determined how long it would take them to save up for a $5,000 car. Students are excited to apply math skills to things that they care about and that they're interested in. As we shift to a deeper learning approach, we put students in the driver's seat. This fosters curiosity and engagement. When students do the work themselves, they learn how to collaborate, compromise, innovate, and problem solve. It's exciting to see their ideas come to life. In this slide, 1st graders are planning and designing fairy houses out in the 17-acre woods. They visit the houses often and use them as a starting point for story writing and art projects. To sum it up, our vision for the future of education is to shift to a more student-led approach or self-determined learning that inspires and encourages curiosity in our kids. We are moving toward a model that provides teachers with time to collaborate for the purpose of planning interdisciplinary units of study. We want our students to have voice and choice and ownership of their learning. We want them to learn outside the 4 walls of the school, in the woods and in the community, because we know this is what they need to be ready for success in the 21st century. Before we present the actual budget, I just want to share that the last 14 months for all of us have been stressful, difficult, scary, and incredibly challenging. And although the pandemic slowed down our move at school to a more toward a more student-centered or deeper learning approach, it did help us discover some really valuable opportunities. And I wanted to share some of those with you. We learned that students and staff work well in pod structures. The pod structures allowed students and staff to build strong and trusting relationships. We learned that fewer transitions and family lunch together outside and in the classrooms fostered conversations between staff and students that don't normally happen. In fact, we have learned that the pod structures and the reduction in transitions have actually reduced student behaviors and lessened some of the anxiety that we have seen in our kids. We can attribute this to the relationships that they've been able to build and the structures that we have in place. We learned that our teachers build their skills and take risks when they collaborate and work together to co-plan and co-teach. We learned that kids are more engaged when curriculum is integrated and when students have the opportunities to facilitate some of their own learning. We also learned that we really miss having the community in our school. And we can't wait to get back to serving community dinners and hosting community events in the school. We have missed the community for sure. The pandemic has made us stronger as a community and as a supervisory union. Before Nikki Buck shares the FY22 budget that will support the vision for the future that I've just described, I want to thank the Hartland community from the bottom of my heart for all the support that was afforded to our school during the pandemic. Our success this year can be attributed to the joint efforts of our staff, our families, and the greater community. So thank you very much. And Nikki, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Christine. And I just wanted to say thanks to Christine and Angie for giving a great presentation of where we're going. This year is really exciting because with the development of that strategic plan, we have really strong goals and objectives for where we're going and how we want to get there. Let me pull my slides up on my other screen. Okay, so this is an overview of our presentation. We're going to discuss student enrollment, high school costs, budget goals, changes from fiscal year 21, which is the one that we're in right now, to fiscal year 22, which is what we're budgeting for, projections and rates for FY22, the supervisory union assessment, and our proposed tax rates. Before we go through this, I just wanted to give you some numbers on Hartland so that you have an idea of how we fit into the greater scheme of Vermont and Windsor County. Heartland is essentially tied with Windsor and Norwich as the third most populous town in Windsor County. And so we're not a small community. And I think that that's important to recognize. The school district, the Hartland School District, takes care of around 450 to 460 students between the ages of 3 and 18. So that includes our pre-K programs and then all the way kindergarten through senior year in high school. This represents about 14% of our Hartland population. So the school reaches a broad number of people in our community. And an interesting note that many people in the community may not be aware of, Hartland has the highest poverty rate as measured by our free and reduced lunch applications in our supervisory union. We have a higher poverty rate than both Windsor, Mount Escutney, Windsor and West Windsor, and Wethersfield. So that creates its own challenges, and that guides some of the budgeting that we do, because we really need to take care of these kids and provide services that these kids may not be getting otherwise. So next slide. So here's a look at our student enrollment. Our incoming kindergarten class is projected to be 26 students. We'll be graduating 46 students this year, and we're sending 37 from 8th grade to high school. There are 42 students, as you can see, in pre-K, but not all of those students go on to kindergarten next year because some are not old enough. And you'll also note that our numbers have decreased from last year. We chose to not include families that chose to homeschool during the pandemic. So we did lose a number of kids due to pandemic concerns, and they are homeschooling. And we really hope we get those students back, and that would bump our numbers up to about the same as last year. But we didn't feel that it was appropriate to budget for that. So next slide. So here's a history of our high school costs. And we wanted to note that in FY20, we budgeted for 28,000, 2 million, sorry, it's a typo of the number, $2,839,077. In actuality, in FY20, we paid over $3 million for our high school education. The reason for that is that we had 9 students move into our district that were unaccounted for when we developed the budget. And that caused us to go over by just under $200,000. And then this year during the pandemic, we also had a number of unbudgeted students move into the district. We expect our FY21 high school costs to increase. But what is really fantastic, if you can say that in these numbers, is that Ed Connors, our finance guru at the supervisory union, was able to offset some of our tuition costs with COVID funding, because these families provided documentation that they moved to Hartland to escape living somewhere else during the pandemic. So it is nice that some of that move-in will be offset using COVID funding. And so FY22 represents all of these students. And I suspect that when we finish this current fiscal year, FY21's actual expenditures will look much closer to what we're projecting for next year. I also want to note that the high school enrollment drives our high school costs, but that the tuition costs to each of the high schools also drives the cost. And the costs for almost all of our high schools are up. And one of our largest receiving high schools had one of the biggest increases. And so that's an additional challenge that we face. Next slide. Here's a summary of our special education costs. We broke it down from fiscal year 14 to 17, where Hartland was paying for all of our special education costs, and we were being reimbursed from the state. In FY19 or in FY18, the state changed the way that special education is distributed, and it became distributed through the supervisory union. And so that's why you see that dramatic decrease there. The actual cost and spending of what those students cost didn't change. It's just a funding allocation did change. So to give you some other numbers, in FY18, we had 214 special education students in our supervisory union. Now in 2020, we have 270 special education students in the supervisory union. This is a really high number, and it represents approximately 23% of all of our students. And this is why you see special education costs being such a large portion of the budget. It is just under a quarter of the students in our buildings. So I think we'll go to the next slide. Thanks, Christine. So the goals for the FY22 budget have been the same goals that the board has had for many, many years. Our goal is to maintain a staffing plan and a program of studies which supports the whole child, and that includes intellectually, emotionally, socially, and physically. And I'm going to say that one of the reasons I'm most excited about the strategic plan is that the strategic plan fits into that whole child philosophy perfectly. And so we really hope that we're going to be hitting all aspects that a kid needs to learn. Our goals, and something that Christine and I review regularly, is how our budgeting meets the Vermont Education Quality Standards as set forth by the State Board of Education. And we also want to retain the trust of you, our voters, by bringing forth a responsible budget. Next slide. Did you go to the next one, Christine?
I did.
Oh, okay.
Let me just check. Hold on. Yes, that's the next slide.
Okay, I still have the goals from FY22 up.
Oh.
There
Now,
does seem to be a delay, Christine, and for whatever reason, when your slide advances for the whole thing to come up, and I'm not sure why.
okay.
Well, I'll start talking about them and I'll keep an eye out for when it changes.
And you're seeing,
I'm
you're
seeing
seeing, what is the headline for your slide?
Vermont Education Quality Standards.
It'll come up in a few seconds.
Try clicking back and then forward again, and then
Okay.
Nikki, there we go.
There we go.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, Christine.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've broken the education quality standards into 2 slides. So I just wanted to review with the taxpayers how we're meeting these education quality standards and also show that we're not dramatically exceeding the education quality standards, which would indicate that we might be over budgeting. For our staffing requirements, kindergarten through 3rd grade is supposed to have less than 20 students per teacher. For next year's programming, we're looking at a minimum class size of 12. And our maximum class size will be 21. We may be able to reduce that further, but that's what we are currently looking at. In our 4th through 8th grade, we try to have, the state would like us to have less than 25 students per teacher on average. We are meeting that with a minimum class size of 17 and a maximum class size of 22. We are definitely below the 25 students per teacher on average. But I feel like we're in a comfortable range, and the teachers agree that this is a comfortable range. All core teachers should have less than 100 students total, and our core teachers include English language arts, math, science, and social studies. And our 7 core teachers in the 5-8 program have approximately 75 students each. If you remember last year's presentation, we were looking at 110 students for our core teachers. And so we had to reconfigure how we were meeting the needs of those students so that we didn't exceed the quality standards, or I guess be worse than the quality standards in that case. For our curriculum requirements in K through 8, kids are supposed to have PE twice a week. And we meet that by having 2 PE teachers. And these teachers are also cross-trained in health. And so that's how we're teaching health education to the students. The state standard is approximately 300 students must have a full-time library media specialist. And we have 1 library media specialist that works with approximately 260 students. And she also teaches STEAM. She's the same teacher that you saw the slide earlier designing the carnivals. So she's doing a great job educating these students. So next slide.
Did it come up?
It did, yes. Okay. So another state quality standard is global citizenship, which includes world language and cultural studies. In Hartland, we have 2 Spanish teachers. 1 teaches K through 5, and she teaches 156 students, or she will teach 156 students next year. The other teaches grades 6 through 8, and she teaches approximately 103 students. We have to provide artistic expression in schools, which is visual, media, and performing arts. For performing arts, we have 1.6 music teachers. A 0.6 is 3 days a week. And they teach instruments, choral, music theory, and drama. And together they serve 261 students. And we have 1 art teacher who sees all 261 students under normal years on a weekly basis. We also have a tiered system of support. The state says that the schools have to provide behavioral supports. To do this, we have 1 assistant principal and 2 social emotional interventionists. This is one of those locations that our high poverty rate does show up in the school. Behavioral challenges are related to high anxiety, and maybe kids not getting all of their needs in the home due to whatever reason. And so we do have to staff up a little bit to be able to provide reasonable standards for both behavioral supports and then also for guidance. The state standard is 1 school counselor per 300 students. Hartland has chosen to have 2 school counselors who also teach social emotional learning. They do group counseling as well as individual counseling. And again, the board has made a conscious decision to maintain 2 school counselors. These counselors are incredibly high demand. I think that the administration would ask for more if they thought that the funding would allow it. We really need to provide these supports to our students. So next slide. And I'm still waiting for it to go.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. It's not your fault.
Let me go back again and see if did it come up?
Yeah, it did. Thank you. Now I know the trick. So what are our changes between the FY21 numbers and the FY22 budget? We are proposing a 0.5 nursing assistant nursing position. We've budgeted for this. If COVID gets under control going into the fall, we will revisit this position. And if we don't need it, we will not hire that position. We've seen a 10% increase in healthcare, which is negotiated at the state level now. We have negotiated a salary increase for our teachers. We, through our contract negotiations, asked our teachers to increase their workday so that their workday aligned with the workday of other schools in the supervisory union. And this, through this negotiation, we gave them a salary increase since they would be working longer hours. But the benefit to us is that they will have the time to do cross-training with supervisory union teachers and collaboration with similar subject areas. So we felt that this was a really important negotiation that we went through. Our special education costs have increased. We had to carry a deficit from 2019 to 2020. That deficit carryover was related to additional high school costs and increased special education costs over what we had budgeted for. And again, our high school tuition has increased, and we don't budget extra for our high school tuition. We budget for the number of students. We even ask the students where they think they're going to be going so that we know the exact budgeting number for the high school that they'll be going to. So we try to do our best to nail down that number. But when students move in that we don't know about, we don't have them in our budget. Next slide.
No.
So how does this all look? Before we get into how it all looks, I just want to say that budgeting is not an exact science. We do our best. There are a variety of projections and rates that are used to prepare the budget. Some of these numbers are calculated within the supervisory union. Some are determined by the Department of Education, the legislature, and these include the number of equalized pupils, the common level of appraisal, and the tax rate. Other projections are based on information gathered from our payees, which is our vendors, high schools, and insurance companies. And some of these rates and costs change after the budget is voted for. And those may include the tax rates, state reimbursement rates, and negotiated salaries. Therefore, our budget is a best estimate and cannot be calculated precisely. I will say that because we are so late in our town meeting, that I do not think our rates, the state approved rates, are going to change at this point. So that's a positive. Next slide. So here's our budget. You can see that wages and benefits of the people that are in the building are our largest portion of the budget and represent a little less than half of the budget. And then the assessment to the SU is one of our largest budget items, as well as tuition to high schools. If you're looking at this, the other category includes excess costs, energy, dues and fees, communication and postage, and the travel and food program. So you can see that we're increasing our wages and benefits. Our contracted services is decreasing. The assessment is increasing, and much of that increase in the assessment is related to pulling transportation, which is our standard daily busing routes, out of the local budget and putting that into the supervisory union budget. So if you skip down to the transportation line, you'll see that the transportation line decreases dramatically by approximately $250,000. We are decreasing our maintenance, and much of that is because we had to do a lot of maintenance in the building to bring our air handlers up to standards so that we could educate students during this COVID time. And we no longer need to do that maintenance. You can see our tuition line is going up, but it will be more in line with what we paid in FY19. We are reducing our supplies budget and our capital equipment budget, and the other budget. So that is the bulk of the budget, and you can see that it increases from $8,642,000 last year to $9,028,700 this year. Next slide. So to break down the supervisory union assessment, the business office, which is our finance people, our HR department, superintendent, all of those categories and all of those people that help all the schools in the supervisory union fall under that budget line. The special education program all comes out of the supervisory union. That is billed back to the towns based on the number of equalized people we have in each building. And that was a decision that was made 5 years ago in an effort to get the special education budget to swing less, because one student in one building can make an enormous difference on a budget. So it is actually helpful that it's at the supervisory union. And then our early childhood program is the education of our 3 to 5 year olds before they come into school. So you can see that the SU assessment is going up by $367,229. And again, the bulk of that change, which is about $250,000, is related to moving the transportation line out of the school district's budget and into the supervisory union budget. So next slide. So how does this impact the tax rates? The current tax rate is 1.736. The new tax rate will be 1.769. This represents a 3.3 cent increase from last year. For a $100,000 home, this is about $33 for the year. For a $250,000 home, it's $83. And for a $500,000 home, it's about $166. We hope that you agree that we've presented a budget that's appropriate for our needs. Next slide. And that's where we'll all entertain questions. Matt,
Great.
you want to come back on?
Thank you, Nikki. So we'll take, I see 2 questions that are in the queue, or 2 individuals who want to ask questions in the queue, and we'll just take those from the top. Why don't we leave up the slides in case we want to go back and reference them as we go along. The first person is Jim, who's been patient in hearing the presentation. And Jim, if your question has not been answered by the presentation, please feel free to ask a question.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it. And I want to thank the administrators and the board for their hard work. I think it was a great presentation. It's great to see that you're focused on the future and that you're taking a modern approach to education. So my question, partly is observation and partly question here. So when I look at the numbers in the town report, it appears as if student enrollment is going down at the same time costs are going up. So while I can understand the equalized pupil percentages and the total increase percentages, I think if you really take total enrollment into account, the budget's likely growing at a faster rate than 4%. It's probably closer to 7. So that's kind of an observation. Another observation, I don't know how accurate these numbers are, but it seems like Vermont's in the top 5 states in per pupil spending, and Hartland seems to be above the Vermont spending average. So part of the question is, are we getting top tier results for our top tier spending? And the second part is, why are costs going up as enrollment's going down? And the last part is really, it sounded like there was a deficit from last year. If that's right, then no further clarification. But if there was a surplus from last year, how is that money being used?
Great, Jim. Thank you, Nikki. I'm going to generally gear questions to you, and then you can effectively, determine if there are other people to contribute to the answers.
Yeah. So I'll try to address some of those, and then I'll ask Christine or David to chime in. Yes, you're right that our enrollment is going down, and we're in a challenging spot right now. You saw how we were meeting the education quality standards. We're not, and our biggest driver of cost is our employees and personnel. Our enrollment has declined, but not to a point that we can cut positions. And that's really how you decrease the costs. And the reason I say the challenge here is that in Hartland, we generally have 2 classes per grade. We're not at a position where we can effectively educate students by putting 1 class per grade. We have done that for 1 class that's particularly small, but for the rest of our grades, they're just too big to assign all of those students to 1 teacher. Another way that we have tried to cut personnel costs is by combining grades. And so where we felt that we could, we have previously combined grades. This presents incredible challenges to our teachers as we're asking our teachers to teach 2 different curriculums during the school day. So we try to avoid that where possible. We have done it in the past to help alleviate some of our personnel costs. This year, we are keeping that 1 small class with 1 individual teacher. And so that class will not have 2 teachers. But again, we don't feel like we can combine our grades yet. This is something that we talk about whenever we talk about budgeting. It's something that we talk about with Ms. Bourne and Dr. Baker pretty frequently. And we're keeping our eyes on the ball. As soon as we get to that position, we will go in that direction. The other driver of our costs is the supports that we provide our students. The school is really one of the only places that students get their needs met, or that kids get their needs met. And these include mental health needs, social, emotional, and behavioral needs. And yes, Vermont's education costs are higher than the rest of the country. And I would argue that some of that is because we're not providing these needs elsewhere. So the school is mental health, the school functions somewhat as a mental health agency. And when you have high poverty rates, which we have in Hartland, you end up having to provide more mental health services to these kids. And that is a very big driver of some of the costs in our building. So that's one of the challenges that we face regularly. And it is also one of the aspects that we learned the most during this pandemic year. We learned some ways that we can meet all of our students better. And we hope that by implementing those techniques going forward, that we'll improve on those services. So I don't know if I met, and I guess I'll summarize by saying that yes, we're above the state average. Our poverty rate is also above the state average, and that does drive costs in the building. Christine or David, do you have any more to add?
No, Nikki, I think you did a great job summarizing some of the challenges and why our costs are a little bit higher than average. I think there was a question on, or part of the question was about how our kids are doing compared to other schools in Vermont. And I can share that, depending on the grade level, we're on track with other schools, but it varies. And as Nikki pointed out, there are sometimes more challenges in particular grade levels, which absolutely impacts teaching and learning. And that's why we're trying to provide the supports that are in the budget so that doesn't happen as often. We also weren't able to take SBAC assessments last year, which is really kind of what we look at over time. So we are gearing up to take SBACs actually next month, so we'll have some more information. But we do an assessment 3 times a year called Track My Progress. And I will say that in the structures that I described earlier, these pod structures, where we really tried to put 2 adults in each room between our special ed staff and our support staff, and make the classes smaller due to COVID restrictions. We had to, spacing wise, and I will share that our TMP scores are tracking pretty well this year, which is great information and actually supports those smaller class sizes, which I know are more expensive. But we're finding, and you would expect, kids are getting more because they have more interaction with their teacher and more support. And I don't know, Jim, if that answers your question well enough.
I think you've answered it as best as you probably can at the moment. My view is that it's good to invest, but it's important that the investment have a strong return, that the money is used wisely. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I appreciate that and agree.
The only other thing I'll add, this is David Baker, superintendent, because Jim, I think your question about getting a return on your investment is a pretty important one. And I will tell you, this year got canceled because of COVID, but on what's considered the nation's report card, right? And you probably know this, right? The National Assessment of Educational Progress. Vermont has always been in the top, 3 or 4 of the states across the nation. And so then when we score well compared to Vermont, which we do in this supervisory union, I think as you spread that across the nation, I think we are getting a pretty good return on investment. And there's a lot of conversation in Vermont about small class sizes and whether we need to maintain, because there's a cost to that. And I think, Jim, your point is a good point. You have to always be looking on return and where's that break even point. But so far, Vermont does pretty well. And I've been happy to spend my 35 years of administration in this state. I think they really focus on, each kid, as Nikki said. So, but it's a great question, Jim, and we'll keep looking at it.
I appreciate it. Thanks for your feedback.
Great. So we have
Thank you, Jim.
we have 3 people with questions in the queue. So let's. I want to continue to move this along. The next one up is Brian, also our town clerk. And Brian, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question. Brian, are you still there? Okay, I'm assuming that Brian's either having technical difficulties or stepped away. So I'm going to move on to, I think it's probably Jennifer. Oh, I'm sorry. Brian, are you back? No, okay. So Jennifer Grant or Rob?
Hi, it's Jennifer Grant. Thank you to the school board and Dave and Christine for this great work. I'm really excited about the Portrait of a Graduate work. It's really inspiring and wonderful to hear about. My question is for Christine. it's been alluded to in some of the other comments and presentation, but I'd love to hear from you specifically around this time of COVID when home-based difficulties may be amplified, how the school is addressing trauma that students either may have undergone or are still undergoing, traumas that are affecting students, and how you're addressing that specifically.
That's a great question, and something that we, sorry, my husband decided it would be a good idea to do some chainsawing outside, so I hope you're not hearing that. It's going back and forth from my headphones. We have been addressing trauma for the last couple of years. We've actually, it's been one of our, I guess you would call, initiatives in our school. We've had a lot of staff trained in trauma transformed classroom work with Dave Melnick from NFI as a supervisory union. We've engaged in that work and had all our staff, have had the initial training and know how to approach children that have experienced trauma. We have a trauma champions team that meets regularly. They meet together and with the administrative team monthly to talk about strategies and implementation of those strategies. So it is at the forefront, I will say, in our recovery plan, which we're working on. We know that one of those areas that we need to really pay attention to is, the emotional state of our kids, and they have some anxiety and some stress around COVID. So we're working really hard to make sure there are the adults there in the school to help the kids. Nikki mentioned our 2 school counselors. We also work in partnership with HCRS. We have an in-house clinician who is able to provide those mental health services for kids in the school. We also work with an organization called We Are Hope. And it's a wonderful organization. They're not clinicians, but they're coaches, and they come into the school, and through our MTSS process, students are referred, and they actually specifically deal with anxiety and working with kids on a daily basis, and setting goals and working on strategies to address that anxiety. I'm trying to think of other ways. I think primarily through our MTSS process, kids are brought to the attention of the team, and we work, we wrap around kids and put all the supports in place that we can. We communicate with families. We make sure kids have food that need food, and clothing and whatever else they may need to help support them. Does that?
Yes, that's very helpful. That's really helpful to have some more depth to something that was sort of mentioned in passing, but to have the whole picture. I really appreciate that. That's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, they need us, so we're really working hard to make sure they get their needs met.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer. Rebecca Genovese, who I'm not supposed to call Becky. Rebecca, why don't you, if you have a question, please unmute yourself.
Hi, Matt. Nice job today. I think this is going well. Congratulations on the 10:59 stop. All right, can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Okay, this question might be best answered. I'll start with a quick one. I didn't see any information, but you alluded to something that caught my attention. Who is our largest school that we're sending to that you said had the largest increase in tuition?
That would be Hartford.
It is still Hartford. Okay.
Yep.
All right. And I was a little curious, and this one might be for Dr. Baker. The special education funding, is Windsor the only of our typical sending high schools that is part of our supervisory district, and that's why they're the only ones who are funded that way?
I can take that first, David, and then you can chime in.
Yeah, go ahead.
All of our special education funding goes through the supervisory union. And so the way that works is like if we have a student at Hartford or Woodstock that requires special education funding, then they will, that school will build the supervisory union, and the supervisory union, the special education budget at the supervisory union takes that. So I don't know if that helps answer your question, or David, if you want to allude more to that. So what I will say is that special education budget includes all of our high school students who go to other schools, and that those schools just bill back to the supervisory union.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it is a good question because I think sometimes we need to be reminded that when our students leave our 8th grade and go off to these high schools, our supervisory union is still considered, or Hartland is still considered the LEA, and it's represented by the supervisory union. So we've got, I don't have the number off the top of my head, but X number of IEP students in grades 9 through 12. Some of those kids are even in specialized settings or residential settings, and that all gets funneled through the supervisory union. The difference with Windsor is because they're part of the supervisory union, they don't add any, if a Hartland student goes to Windsor, they don't add any excess cost because we've already built that special ed cost into the full supervisory union budget. But if a student goes to Woodstock or Hartford, it's very likely and quite common that we'll get, in addition to the tuition that Nikki's talking about, we'll get another excess cost bill for either case management services or physical therapy, psychological services, and those can be pretty. Those bills can be pretty steep, and that's why we decided a few years ago, as Nikki said, to actually assess special ed costs by equalized pupil, because we were reminded that we own all of our kids right through the time of graduation from high school. So I don't know if that helps, but that's where we are.
Thank you, David. That's exactly the explanation I was looking for, maybe more people to hear and understand. It just that the note in our text that we have pointed out that extra charges could come with certain schools. And I would just encourage us as a school district in budgeting to really keep an eye on that. That if all these schools that we're sending to are in fact public, they can't really pick and choose, and picking and choosing and charging more or less is the same thing, in my opinion. All right, last one I wanted to say is that I really want to say kudos on the pods thing. Teams and pods, it's no surprise to me. My graduate work was in small schools within schools. And I hope that you'll continue to see behavior as students become known and they trust the adults surrounding them, that they really genuinely care. That is absolutely what the research into pods within schools supports. And it may even in the long run, perhaps to touch on Jim's question, even that it may even save you money to be going with that sort of a format, even to continue it in the future, because you have a lot of para positions. And I understand the need and the value of them, but they are expensive because they all come with healthcare and everything else. So I think it's great work. I was really excited by the student outcomes that you've designed. I'm impressed. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thanks, Rebecca. All right, we will loop back around to Brian Stoffolino if he is, well, his raised hand went back down. I'm assuming that there's, Brian, if you do have a question, you're able to unmute yourself if you would like. All right, I will assume that it was answered, resolved, or it was a raised hand by accident. Nikki was making up for your lack of raising hand. All right, so are there any other questions that anyone has on the budget, portrait of a child, or any of the other items that we have covered? Okay, all right. If not, we will move on to Article 6, which is the straightforward article to transact any other business which may properly come before the meeting.
Oh, we have other business.
Oh, you have other business. Excellent. Okay.
I want to take a minute to announce that we are putting together a building committee. We have not revisited the building in quite a while. And to do this announcement, I'm actually going to read some text that our board member, Sarah Stewart Taylor, put together to announce the building committee. So the Hartland School Board will be establishing a building committee to look at some possible projects on our Martinsville Road campus. There are exciting opportunities to invest in our school property because of federal dollars coming to Vermont school districts. And we want to be ready to use those funds in a way that will benefit Hartland students for generations to come. Our building, and this is a side note for me, our building has not seen significant updates in many, many years, and I think I could say decades. And as long as I've been around, that we have not seen significant updates. So areas that we're exploring include potential construction of a theater/cafeteria to support our wonderful drama and local food service programs. Looking at better integrating classroom spaces to make them more adapted to integrated teaching between rooms, perhaps installing modular walls. We're looking for a safer and more efficient front office setup to improve security and communication and to make the building more welcoming. For people who have not been in the building, you have to wind through some of our hallways before you can even get to the front office. And that presents both a security and a welcoming issue. And then we're also looking to improve upon our outdoor learning spaces to make them accessible to all students and take better advantage of the resources that we have in the 17-acre woods next to the school. So we are soliciting letters of interest from the community. And if you're interested in being on this committee, please send your letter or email to Principal Bourne, and we'll look at people's interest, why they're interested, some of their qualifications for knowledge on building needs, and we'll put together a committee that represents the community to help us figure out what our priorities are moving forward. So that is all of the information we have.
Great. So, Nikki, does that cover the other business section for as far as you're concerned?
Yes.
Any other business that would be appropriate for this informational meeting, or questions about the building committee?
While we're waiting for questions to come in, I just want to say thank you as the chair of the Hartland School Board to the community, to all of our parents, and especially to all of our board members and all of our administrators. This team is fantastic to work with, and I really just couldn't ask for better minds to help prepare the budget and to also help lead the future of our school. So thank you, everybody.
Great. John Bartholomew, do you have a question?
Not a question. I just want to encourage the school board to remember that the ARPA funding might, depending on the rules that go into place, might be usable for some of these building changes that are being proposed. So just encourage the school board to keep track of what's going on with that.
That is why we are trying to pull this committee together. Thank you, John.
I think that is very much in focus. Thank you. Any other? Stacy Bradley has a question or comment. Stacy, you can unmute. Stacy, we can't hear you, although you appear to be unmuted. Stacy, we still can't hear you. I'm not sure why. You're back on mute. Stacy, well, you just unmuted again. Stacy, I'm afraid we can't hear you. You're back on mute. You were off mute for a little bit, but we couldn't hear you when you came in. You're welcome to try logging back in, and we can wait a minute for you. Okay. If you want to log back in, we'll wait a minute here. I want to make sure we're giving people the chance they would like.
Yeah, Matt, this is Dave Baker. While we're waiting, I want to echo Nikki's thoughts and thank the community for all the support. I know the board really appreciates it. And Matt, I want to thank you too you did a great job today. I listened to some of the town meeting and this meeting. It's not easy. I mean, we're getting better at it, but it's not always easy, but you did a great job. And I want to tell you, anytime you want to come and teach for us, your wait time is amazing. I mean, that's one of the things that's toughest to teach a teacher is about wait time. But you did an excellent job today. So you must have some teaching in your background. I'm sure of that. But thank you for the work you did today.
It's hereditary, as some people know. So thank you. All right. I don't see Stacy coming back on. I think she knows how to get a hold of most people. And anyway, to your point, David, I spend lots of time on Zoom. Even with the lots of time and skill, that doesn't prevent all technical problems from going aside. The good news is we're still a small community where people are accessible, and everyone should feel free between now and Election Day to reach out to folks on the school board, who can certainly reach out to Christine or David to be able to get any answers to the questions that you have. To remind, Nikki? I was just going to say, to remind everyone, all ballots have been mailed to everyone. And some folks have already started voting. Others have not voted yet. There is a secure ballot drop box right by Damon Hall that folks are up for using. For those that's more convenient or are cheap Yankees and don't want to pay for the postage. But there is time between now and the 4th to be able to ask questions and to make an informed decision. Just please do make sure that you get the ballots in by that date, because just like the last COVID election process, ballots do need to be postmarked or in hand by the date, the election date. Nikki, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you. I just wanted to give a big shout out and thank you to CATV and Thomas Bishop for organizing today and really pulling this together. For those of you who are listening in, we all did a practice round to make sure that we could all do this, and they facilitated that. So I just wanted to say thank you, and we appreciate the work that you guys did, and we also appreciate that you guys reached out to us and suggested that this would be a useful way of doing it, and we agree. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thomas has been fantastic, a great pilot. I wouldn't call him co-pilot since he was sort of running everything behind the scenes. Stacy seems to be back. Stacy, do you want to try your question again? Thomas, if you want to give Stacy the ability to ask a question. Stacy, you're off mute, but we're still not hearing you. I'm sorry. Unless someone else is able to hear her. No. Okay. Well, we will. With that, unless any other comments, questions on this beautiful Saturday. Great. With that, I'll take since this is a school board meeting, a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion because I don't ever get to do that.
Nikki moves to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second. I beat.
Colleen spends seconds. All those in favor, please raise your hand in the Zoom box. Appears to be unanimous, and we are adjourned at 12:24.
Oh,
Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you to all of our town